All right. Good morning. Bonjour tout le monde. We will begin the meeting as now-ish as possible. I'd like to ask members of the committee to please take your seats. We do have quorum, so we can start, but if there's any trying to find their way in, please do so. If I'd known that reviewing the budget would bring in this kind of a crowd, we should do it more often. Maybe not. Merci et bonjour à ce réunion de la Comité sur l'environnement et de la protection climatique. Welcome to this meeting of Tuesday, the 21st of November, 2017. We will start with the ceremonial part of this meeting. Yes, in fact, that accounts for a good part of this crowd. And we have the annual environmental awards that we will begin with. So those of you who are here for agenda items that are coming later, the budget, energy evolution, etc., there will be seats afterwards, I assure you. But first of all, we'll start with the awards. So rather than begin the formal part of the meeting, I think I'd like to go straight into the awards first, and I will go over to the other podium and join City Manager Steve Kanellakis for that. Now he's here. All right, we're live. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs. I'd like to welcome our city manager, Steve Kanellakis, and senior management, and the award nominees who are joining us this morning. Thank you all for being here for the 2017 Environmental Excellence Awards ceremony. Je vous remercie tous de votre présence à la cérémonie de remise des prix d'excellence en matière d'environnement de 2017. I'd like to begin by welcoming Steve Kanellakis to say a few words. Steve.
Thank you, Chair Chernyshevsky and members of the Environment and Climate Protection Committee. Warm welcome to all the nominees who've demonstrated leadership and innovation in helping make our city greener, cleaner, and healthier. We play such an important role in protecting our environment, encouraging responsible practices within our community. Our city staff lead by example, and I see that every day. And the dedication of the nominees that are here today ensures that we continue to make great strides in using environmentally sustainable practices in our planning and our work. You've helped us move forward on our environmental protection and sustainability goals, and it's that leadership and innovation that's ensured that we're using technologies to reduce energy consumption, provide greener options to protect our natural resources, and reduce our environmental footprint. We're implementing sustainable transportation options, including our transit system, biking and walking infrastructure, and we're making sure we protect our natural habitats by monitoring the health of our rivers and reducing waste wherever possible. The projects and initiatives that have been nominated this year speak to the talent and expertise of our people here at the city and to the strength of our commitment to make a difference in our community and for future generations. You should all be very proud of what you've accomplished. Thank you for being leaders in green and sustainable municipal practices and for your dedication to protecting our environment. With that, I'd like to hand it back over to Councillor Chernyshevsky to announce the nominees and award the recipients. Congratulations to all the nominees, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Steve. As chair of the Environment and Climate Protection Committee, it's my pleasure to acknowledge the many employees who are working towards sustainable communities. Nous devons encourager les pratiques plus écologiques dans notre collectivité et aussi prêcher par l'exemple. These annual awards are an important way of recognizing members of staff who are helping reduce energy consumption and keeping our city green, beautiful, and healthy. Les bonnes pratiques environnementales sont également bonnes pour notre rentabilité et permettent de réduire les dépenses à long terme. Notre ville a recours à l'innovation et à la technologie pour protéger nos ressources naturelles et réduire notre empreinte écologique. Thank you to all the nominees for your commitment to environmental stewardship and for your leadership and dedication to environmental protection. There were two categories for nominations: the internal initiatives that reduce the city's corporate environmental footprint, and community projects that reduce the overall community footprint. A total of 11 nominations were received this year in the two categories. The four internal category nominations are the Innovation Center at Bayview Yards, the Monaghan Stormwater Management Facility Rehabilitation Project, the 2017 Ottawa Rideau River Spring Floods Response and Recovery, and the Urban Forest Management Plan. Ces 4 candidats représentent l'idéal en matière de connaissances, de professionnalisme et de travail d'équipe. I'd like to invite all nominees in the internal category to please stand, and I invite everyone to join me in a round of applause for their outstanding contributions. I'd like to begin then with an honorable mention in this year's internal category, which goes to the Innovation Center at Bayview Yards. So, congratulations to Leslie Collins, Hugh Nguyen, Robin Suchin, and Aaron Tate for your incredible work on the Innovation Center. This former City of Ottawa Public Works building on a brownfield site sat vacant for a number of years and was at risk of being demolished. Through the work of this team, the building is now designated a heritage building and has been repurposed as a community innovation center that supports entrepreneurship and small business development. Il s'agit d'une grande installation qui représente l'innovation et les pratiques exemplaires en matière de durabilité. Thank you and congratulations to the team on this honorable mention. Now I am pleased to announce the recipient of this year's Environmental Excellence Award in the internal category. The award goes to the team responsible for the Urban Forest Management Plan. Congratulations to David Barkley, Marika Clark, Martha Cobstake, Matthew Haley, Julie Jackson, Jason Pollard, Mark Richardson, Tracy Lee Schwetz, John Smith, Tracy Smith, and Nicholas Stowe. This team is being recognized for their incredible work in developing the City of Ottawa's Urban Forest Management Plan. Ottawa's urban forest is fundamental to the city's social, economic, and environmental health and sustainability. This strategic and innovative approach to urban forest management, based on broad stakeholder consultations, is designed to preserve urban forests over the coming decades. This plan will ensure our forest continues to reduce demand on energy, remove air pollution, protect us against UV radiation, control flooding, mitigate urban heat islands, and provide a range of other climate change adaptation services. Congratulations and thank you all for your passion and dedication to the preservation of existing trees and forests that will benefit generations to come. Right. So we're coming up now? Yeah. So if members of that team could please come forward. Okay. There were 7 nominations this year in the community category. The nominations are for Alison Smedley, Cameron Neal, the City of Ottawa's Biosolids Program, Aaron Tate, the Water Does Wonders Project as part of the Healthy Kids Community Challenge, the Household Hazardous Waste Campaign, and McElwraith Bridge Mitigation Measures for Species at Risk. Before we announce this year's winner, I would like to invite all nominees from the community category to please stand and please join me in a round of applause. It's now my pleasure to announce the 2017 Environmental Excellence Award winner in the community category. This award goes to the amazing team responsible for the Water Does Wonders project as part of the Healthy Kids Community Challenge. Congratulations. Okay. Congratulations to Christine Collins, Justin Hopner, David Jones, Laurie Levesque, and Kimberly Stephen. These employees from 3 different departments are responsible for the hugely successful Water Does Wonders project as part of the Healthy Kids Community Challenge. The project focused on education, promotion, and awareness of the health and environmental benefits of drinking City of Ottawa tap water. Ce projet a permis de promouvoir les bienfaits de l'eau sur la santé et a mis en lumière des stratégies visant à atteindre les avantages environnementaux, y compris une variété de nouvelles activités novatrices dans la communauté. Through partnerships, community engagement, and quality execution, this innovative and dedicated team met a number of objectives in a short time frame. This helped them increase awareness of the health, social, and environmental benefits of drinking Ottawa's tap water and reducing the consumption of single-use water bottles. Congratulations, and thank you, and please join me. Please join me for a round of applause again as we congratulate all the recipients. Nous sommes très fiers du professionnalisme et du dévouement du gagnant d'aujourd'hui et de tous les candidats nommés pour ce prestigieux prix. On behalf of my council colleagues, city manager, and general managers, let me say how appreciative we are. Thank you once again. Merci beaucoup. And all the nominees, I'm being asked to remind you, in the Heritage Room, the certificates are available. Please drop by. Good morning once again. While we're waiting for the room to be ready to start, I would like to remind anyone who is attending for the first time or is not familiar with the process that public delegations are welcome to speak to any of the items that are on the formal agenda of the meeting. If you have not already signed up to do so, you can go to the desk to my right at the entrance and fill in the registration form there. You are welcome to speak for 5 minutes, and following your presentation, there may be questions from members of the committee. To begin today's meeting then, do we have any declarations of interest? Seeing none. Confirmation of minutes from the meeting of Tuesday, the 17th of October, 2017. Received? Okay, we've had a request for the lights to come up a bit here. The agenda, we will actually be having presentations, some of them quite short, others longer on all of the agenda items. Items 2 and 3, the tax and rate supported budget. And then item 4, energy evolution, Ottawa's community energy transition strategy phase 1. We'll have presentations for those, and we will also have a short introduction presentation on the corporate electric vehicle charging station policy, item 5. Information previously distributed. We have item A, air quality monitors, and B, a conference report. If those are received, we move to item 3. Sorry, item 3 is just a status update. Yep, my mistake. Item 2 was the budget. So we can go back to that then. Item 3, the status update, committee inquiries and motions. Is that received? Okay, thank you. That leaves item 2, 4, and 5 for presentations then. So let us begin with the budget presentation. 2018 draft operating and capital budget, tax and rate supported, Environment and Climate Protection Committee. Do we want Councillor Vice Chair to read the motions onto the record? I think we would. Typically read the motions on now or after the presentation? Yeah, okay. All right. So over to you, Mr. Wiley. You're leading off then here.
Good morning,
Please go
Chair
ahead.
and Committee, and we're pleased to be presenting the Environment and Climate Protection Committee draft 2018 budget here today. I'll be co-presenting with Steve Willis. So on the agenda today, we'll be reviewing the operating and capital budgets. We'll be reviewing the rate and capital budget. We'll be updating also on the environmental initiatives, the strategic initiatives, as well as the departmental initiatives. So in the draft tax budget areas of review, we'll be looking at infrastructure services, environmental services, or environmental initiatives, I'm sorry, solid waste services, and forestry. So this slide is broken down into proposed expenditures, recoveries, and revenue. It also highlights the overall change from 2017 budget. In total, the proposed tax-supported operating budget for environment and climate protection allocates $122 million towards infrastructure services at $29 million, environmental initiatives at $531,000, solid waste services at $74 million, and forestry services at about $18 million. This represents a $1.19 million injection into the 2018 budget. Approximately half this funding will go towards material and services, mainly due to contractual increases. There are no proposed changes to staffing. Next one. Some of the key highlights of the proposed budget include adjustments for potential contract settlements, increments, and benefit changes, usual COLA. No minimum wage impact for this bundle of services, so we don't have any impact from the new provincial legislation. Increase resulting on inflation on recycling, green bin, leachate hauling, and garbage collection program costs, and an increase in the solid waste fee for single-family and multi-res households by $2 for single family and $1 for multi-res respectively.
So, Mr. Chair, just to bring the committee through the capital summary budget from the tax-supported elements. The city's environmental initiatives for 2018 include increasing the green fleet, acquiring natural areas, developing a strategy for energy management and investment in community energy initiatives, and the $2.5 million needed for these initiatives will come from the Capital Reserve Fund and debt. The 2018 draft budget provides sufficient funds for the city's anticipated urban and rural acquisition requirements in the coming year. Under the urban lands natural areas acquisition budget, the city would have just over $1.9 million available for the acquisition of urban natural areas, 1.7 of that, 1.76 of that coming from the Environmental Resource Area Acquisitions Reserve, and $170,000 in addition topping that up. We are currently in progress of negotiations for one property acquisition in 2018, and that is the Shea Woods. We're completing the transaction as council approved in the last council meeting. And by the end of 2018, the city expects to carry forward just under $300,000 in urban acquisition. Under the rural acquisition budget, the city would have $1.45 million available for acquisitions of rural natural areas, and that comes from $1.1 million carried forward and $340,000 top-up through the 2018 budget. We are in process of up to 4 major property acquisitions in the balance of 2017 and into 2018, each in partnership with other conservation organizations. So we are leveraging up our investment by partnering for these acquisitions. And we've committed just over $1 million in principal to these 4 acquisitions. I'm not able to disclose those because those are part of ongoing negotiations. But at the end of 2018, if we complete these initiatives, we expect to carry forward $441,000 in the Rural Acquisition Fund. At this point, I'll hand back to Kevin.
$10.7 million is earmarked for solid waste assets, which would come from the Capital Reserve Fund and some from debt. The biggest project here is capping of Stage 2 at Trail Road, which would get about $7.6 million. Other projects include purchasing new vehicles for the landfill and regulatory work on the Trail Road waste facility. In order to accomplish these initiatives identified in the capital budget, the draft ECPC budget for 2018 would draw $13 million from the Capital Reserve Fund and take on an additional $200,000 in debt for environmental initiatives and solid waste services.
So the draft rate budget, which is the budget that comes from the fees people, ratepayers pay for their water consumption, which pays for water services, wastewater services, and stormwater services. The city maintains more than $5.1 billion in infrastructure in the water, wastewater, and stormwater category of assets. This includes 8,500 kilometers of water, sanitary and storm sewer pipes, 2 water purification plants, a wastewater treatment plant, a sewage treatment plant, 92 pump stations, and more than 5,800 culverts. The total replacement value of these assets is nearly $21 billion, which is almost about half of what our total asset base is for the entire city. So the rate-supported operating budget in this category for 2018, the draft budget put before you, allocates $382.3 million towards drinking water, which would receive $178.9 million, wastewater, which would receive $154.9 million, and stormwater, which would receive $48.5 million in services as well. The draft 2018 budget estimates $359.4 million in revenue to be generated from the fees and services for drinking water, which would bring in anticipated revenue of $173.7 million, wastewater $139.1 million, and stormwater $46.6 million. Starting in January 1st, 2018, the average urban household that is connected to the municipal water service and uses 15 cubic meters of water would pay an additional $750 per year for water services. Next slide, please. So some of the highlights of the changes are adjustments for both potential contract settlements, increment, and benefits changes. No minimum wage impact in this category either, as Mr. Wiley had said. So as per Council's previous decision for the rate increases, the drinking water rate increase would would go up by 4%, wastewater would go up by 5%, and stormwater rate would increase by 5%. And these increases are driven by inflation in materials and contracts, increased debt servicing costs, and an increased contribution to the infrastructure rehabilitation itself. Excuse me, I misstated that the rate increase would be for the average user for 15 cubic meters of water would pay an additional $7.50. I think I added a few decimal points to that. I apologize for that, Mr. Chair. So in the capital budget summary related to the capital expenditures for water, wastewater, and stormwater, $36.9 million is earmarked for 24 drinking water assets. The biggest projects include the rehabilitation of communal well systems and rehabilitation of water treatment. Will get $10.4 million and $9.5 million respectively. Other projects include improving water mains, such as constructing a water main on Strandherd Road and renewing the Lemieux Island Pipe Bridge. $45.3 million is earmarked for 13 integrated roads, water, and wastewater projects, and this is where we are digging the entire infrastructure up and replacing the entire street and everything below it. The biggest project in this category is Elgin Street from Lisgar to Isabella Avenue, which will get $21.9 million. Other projects include Aylmer Avenue from Fulton Avenue to Rosedale Avenue and Onslow Crescent from Belgrave Road to Beckwith Road. $28.6 million is earmarked for 5 integrated water and wastewater projects. The biggest project will be to renew the Valley Drive storm sewer. We'll get $17 million. $38.3 million is earmarked for 13 stormwater assets, and the biggest projects include renewing culverts and the Graham Creek storm sewer, which will get $17 million and $15 million respectively. $48.6 million is earmarked for 20 wastewater assets. The Robert O. Picard Environmental Center will get $22.5 million for renewal work. Other projects include rehabilitating a sewage pumping station, repairing wastewater sewers, and flood protection for Bridlewood North. In this draft budget for the capital program, the city is allocating $201.6 million to renew and grow the city's infrastructure and for strategic initiatives. This includes drawing $123.6 million from the Capital Reserve Fund and taking on an additional $71.4 million in debt. I'll hand back to Kevin.
We'd also like to take this opportunity to review some of our strategic and departmental initiatives to provide you with an update on the goals and statuses of each. The Water Environment Strategy is a comprehensive strategy to protect the health of the city's watercourses, wetlands, and groundwater, and to mitigate impacts of human activity. It is one of 17 projects approved under the Ottawa River Action Plan, a $4 million in operating dollars allocated to this initiative. Both performance measures of this initiative are complete. There are more than 40 specific projects that are being undertaken under Phase 2 of the Water Environment Strategy. Almost 1/3 of those projects are complete, with the same number currently underway. The Planning, Infrastructure, and Economic Development Department and Public Works Environmental Services are responsible for the majority of these projects. The performance measurement in forest cover for this initiative is to achieve tree planting target of 125,000 trees per year, and I'm pleased to say that we're tracking above that for this year. Initiatives for protecting and increasing tree cover include tree planting in urban, suburban, and rural areas, and rehabilitation of parks and green spaces as part of the Tree Ottawa initiative. The Emerald Ash Borer Woodlot Management Strategy focuses on the rehabilitation of 993 parks and 187 municipal natural features in the management of the Emerald Ash Borer beetle. We are on track to meet our planting targets, and as I said, probably exceed them this year.
Phase 1 of the Energy Evolution Strategy is the next item, I believe, on the agenda after the budget presentation today. And in that strategy, which we'll talk about in more detail at that time, we're proposing a series of 33 short-term actions between 2017 and 2020 as part of that strategy. 27 of the 33 actions can be done using existing resources that are already within the organization, and 19 of the actions can begin right in 2018. One of the new initiatives that we're proposing, and it becomes from the learning we did from the initial catalyst projects in the Energy Evolution Program, is we are recommending a new program called the Community Energy Innovation Fund. And this fund is intended to seek development of viable energy efficiency opportunities and savings within the community for Ottawa's low-carbon future. In the first quarter of 2018, staff will propose a mandate, financing, and governance model to Council with the expectation that we could make the program available for applications later in the spring with the program partnerships occurring beyond that. So staff have requested $500,000 to support this initiative as part of the 2018 budget. And this is new, because in the 2017 budget, what we had was operating money. By putting it as capital money, we are creating a program that has the potential in the governance model to become a fixture of our plan in the future. So we are looking as part of that governance model, and we'll come back with options for Council on the governance model, but some of the ideas looking for long-term sustainability of funding going into that pool of money will be in the context of the broader capital budget, but we're also looking at the possibility of where dividends from Hydro Ottawa exceed the estimates in the long-range financial plan in any given year, that it might be an opportunity to divert a portion of that at Council's discretion to top up the fund in those years. That's one of but it's among several options we're looking at this stage. This is just one of the early ideas. We're also, as a group, working with other municipalities as part of a program called Low Carbon Cities Canada, and this is where we'll work with community members to put proposals into this program to try to leverage cities' investment up and beyond. And I think the intention of the Community Energy Innovation Fund is to take our investment, match it up with community or perhaps sponsors, and then seek additional investment through the carbon tax proceeds at the senior levels of government or through funding from FCM to try to multiply that money of investment when we bring projects forward with the community. We'll begin phase 2 of the Energy Evolution Project in 2018, and it will focus on energy efficiency and conservation in buildings and transportation, waste and energy storage, and those will become key inputs to the new official plan, which we'll be doing in the next term of Council. Staff are recommending that to bring back an update on the energy evolution strategy. We're bringing you the phase 1 plan today. We recommend coming back in quarter 1 2019 with an update on how phase 1 is working. Another very significant project that is underway and under construction is the combined sewage storage tunnel, and we're very excited that the actual tunnel boring testing is begun, and we'll actually be into the rock and doing rock removal very soon. And is the cornerstone of the Ottawa River Action Plan. You'll recall that this is part of ensuring that we reduce the instances of sewage overflow, and to a limited area of the city provide some additional flood relief. This construction is underway on this $232 million project, and it's expected to be operational in 2020. The other important program, which is a strategic initiative of this term of Council, is the update of the Comprehensive Asset Management Program. And in September, we presented the update of the CAM program to Council for the water and sewer rate-supported programs and the city's long-range financial plan together as a bundled package, so we can see the relationship between those two long-term financial strategies. And that program is designed to ensure that we use the right intervention on the right asset, particularly focused on critical infrastructure at the right time in order to address risk and affordability of the entire program. So on the next slide, I'm going to present an update on a series of departmental initiatives. And one of the things that it's important to understand is that environmental initiatives occur in almost all of the departments of the organization, but the larger players in delivery of environmental programs are Public Works and Environmental Services, Planning, Infrastructure and Economic Development, Recreation, Culture, Facility Services, because they manage our building assets and inventory, and Transportation Services because of their efforts on transit and mobility alternatives. So as part of Council's program on the Air Quality and Climate Change Management Plan, in this budget, there's $1 million towards improving energy efficiency at city facilities in support of the Energy Management Investment Strategy, $500,000, which is to support the municipal green fleet, which is the increment above purchasing a vehicle as standard fuel sources. So this is above and beyond the vehicle replacement. It's to pay for the increment to get a lower carbon or a non-carbon source of fuel for our fleet elements in the green fleet plan. $500,000 as part of the Community Energy Initiative program that I talked about earlier, $1.3 million to plant 125,000 trees across the city, and $4 million to include cycling facilities across the city.
I did neglect to introduce Kayla Dover at the beginning. Kayla's up here helping us with the slides and also keeping us honest. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So as is regular procedure here with the budget item, I would ask first, before we go to delegations, followed by questions of staff, I'd ask Vice Chair Chiarelli if he could read onto the record the roadmap motions for approving the budget, and then I'll ask Councillor McKenney if she wants to read onto the record her amending motion following this. Okay.
Thank you. Moved by myself that the Environment and Climate Protection Committee recommends that Council, sitting as Committee of the Whole, approve the Environment and Climate Protection Committee 2018 tax-supported draft operating and capital budget as follows. 1, infrastructure services as follows. A, user fees. B, operating resource requirement. 2, environmental initiatives operating resource requirement. 3, solid waste services as follows. A, user fees. B, operating resource requirements. 4, forestry services as follows. A, user fees. B, operating resource requirement. 5, Environment Climate Protection Committee capital budget. And we have additional motion there. Secondly, that Environment and Climate Protection Committee recommends that Council, sitting as Committee of the Whole, approve the Environment and Climate Protection Committee 2018 rate-supported draft operating and capital budget as follows. 1, drinking water services as follows. A, user fees. B, operating resource requirement. 2, wastewater services as follows. A, user fees. B, operating resource requirement. 3, stormwater services as follows. A, user fees. B, operating resource requirements. 4, the Environment and Climate Protection Committee rate-supported capital budget.
Thank you. Councillor McKenney, then, if you want to introduce your amending motion.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll just read it out, and we can have that discussion as we go along. Whereas Ottawa's renewable energy strategy is a term of council priority, and whereas energy evolution is a renewable energy strategy designed to manage energy consumption, promote the use of renewable energy, and advance local economic development opportunities in Ottawa, and whereas the energy evolution strategy aligns with the sustainable environmental services strategic priority to provide sustainable environmental services that balance protection of our natural resources and support the planned growth of the city with the duty to ensure fiscal sustainability and meet legislative requirements in the delivery of municipal services. And whereas a key consideration of the energy evolution strategy is Council's directive to reduce community-wide GHG emissions by 80% below 2013 levels by 2050, and whereas the 2018 draft budget allocates only $500,000 towards the Community Energy Fund to allow community partners to leverage funding from private and public sources, including provincial renewable energy programs and FCM grants, and whereas there are no dedicated staff positions in the corporate smart energy office to support this work, therefore, be it resolved that $200,000 be allocated towards 2 temporary FTEs to staff the Smart Energy Office, and that this funding be reallocated from the $500,000 from the Community Energy Fund.
Thank you, and we will debate that motion after we through the rest. Now there's a technical motion as well from Vice Chair Chiarelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, this is from the Environmental Stewardship Advisory Committee, which had a great meeting not too long ago, and Mr. Willis was a superstar at that meeting, by the way. The motion is that the ESAC committee support that the surplus from Hydro Ottawa dividend be directed to renewable energy programs and initiatives. So I will, with that motion, I will move a referral of this motion to council, just for jurisdictional reasons.
Okay, thank you. So all of us will, we will do. Thank you. all of those we will decide on after we have gone through the rest of the process. Then now, for those who are new and those who are regulars, we will first of all receive the delegations. Currently, I have 4 delegations signed up on this item on the budget. Following those, we will have questions from members of the committee to city staff, and then we will debate the budget item. So first of all, or I'll read all 4 of them on the list in order. I have Bill Eggertson representing the Environmental Stewardship Advisory Committee, who will be followed by Rob Barnes, the Ecology Ottawa, Janice Ashworth, the Chamber of Commerce Sustainability Committee, and then Angela Keller-Herzog and Sheila Perry on behalf of the Federation of Citizens Associations. So in turn, if you could come forward. Thank you. Bill Eggertson, please go ahead. You have 5 minutes.
ESAC wishes to start by expressing our sincere appreciation for the detailed budget briefing we received last week from a large number of senior staff. Their clarifications have helped to inform our comments, and we hope this level of briefing becomes standard practice for the city's advisory committees. ESAC commends the city for moving in the right direction on environmental stewardship in the draft budget, but we feel the city is moving too slowly and too gingerly. More needs to be done now. A municipal budget is a complex spreadsheet with many competing interests and fixed costs. Residents demand services from clean water and garbage collection to police and fire. But once those basic services are provided, city leaders must raise the spirit of our community by setting ambitious goals for the greater good. ESAC views environment and climate protection as the most important challenge that this city will ever tackle. Ottawa has clean air and a clean environment because we have no smokestacks, not because our behavior is any better than any other city. Council has enunciated an aspiration to go even cleaner, and you've put in a number of baby steps, but to go further requires a commitment to go bolder, as the climate conference in Bonn, 15,000 scientists, and the International Energy Agency all warned last week. The time to act was yesterday, so the imperative to act rests firmly on Council's shoulders to make all aspects of environmental sustainability a priority for everything we do in Ottawa. There must be complete cross-departmental emphasis on environmental issues. Every day that our planning department allows poorly designed buildings to be constructed adds another albatross for decades to come. The same if our roads department keeps adding more and wider strips of asphalt. Environmental stewardship transcends just ECPC. It must be an overarching priority for all city departments. We must stop calling environmental initiatives a cost. They are investments which yield both short-term and long-term benefits for all citizens. To date, our city has been fortunate to miss most of the rising waters, droughts, hurricanes, melting snowcaps, forest fires, and other anthropomorphic disasters that are wreaking havoc around the world. Even climate deniers know that Ottawa spends $5 billion a year to import carbon energy that then threatens our environment and forces us to spend even more money on adaptation and repair. The city's Environmental Services Department took a hit under last year's reorg. We've been told that you manage by reallocating staff, although the budget calls for maintaining the complement at 2 FTEs. We suggest this may result in problems if we are really serious about moving the environment file forward. ESAC would like to submit some comments on the budget with a few subtle suggestions to get us thinking outside the box, especially for offsetting revenues. In forestry, the goal to plant 125,000 trees works out to 6 trees per acre. Are we sufficiently engaging the community by using residents to plant and care for the right trees? Should we return to the former practice of distributing free or low-cost trees? To underscore the link between trees and the environment, would it be more effective to consider a very minor tax credit for properties which maintain good quality trees? Is the funding sufficient to deal with the growing threat of invasive species? Solid waste constitutes 60% of that gross operating budget, and residents will be asked to pay more for garbage pickup. Have we optimized recycling so the existing collection infrastructure can handle additional houses? Are there alternative ways to increase waste diversion in multi-unit residential and the ICI sectors? Perhaps incentives to reduce both capital and operating costs of landfill dumps. On water, revisions to the provincial building code include mandatory greywater measures, but opposition is coming from cities that are worried about the implications for supply and treatment infrastructure. We trust that Ottawa is not one of these. On cycling and pedestrian infrastructure, ESAC supports efforts to expand the availability of alternative low-carbon mobility, and we like the strong emphasis on safety. The cycling network needs to fill in missing gaps and link to the LRT, while for pedestrians, there is need for increased winter sanding of sidewalks. Is it time for Ottawa to develop a vision for cars beyond the LRT, with a consultation on all options, including congestion charging? Using biofuels and greening the city fleet are good, but we have concerns with the free charging at L1 outlets. This sends the signal that electricity is free. It is not. Have you considered increasing enforcement of our existing anti-idling bylaw for private vehicles with the revenue from those fees directed into environmental objectives to underscore the link between bad behavior and good outcomes? As mentioned by Councillor Shirley at ESAC's recent meeting, we did support the proposal to channel surplus funds from Hydro Ottawa into the Community Energy Fund, although Council's goal should be to reduce consumption of energy to the point where it is unlikely that there could ever be a large surplus. In summary, ESAC knows that money is scarce and resources are few. It is not the job of advisory committees to change line items in budgets. Professionals do that, and in an election year, we assume they've done a better job than normal. It is ESAC's job to reflect a community view of where, when, and how the city should move on environmental issues, and our advice is step up the game drastically. Your baby steps are good, but we're not comfortable with the level of community
You're
awareness.
summing up now, are you, I hope?
In 2
5
weeks,
minutes. Thank you.
we mark the 20th anniversary of the Kyoto Protocol. I recently addressed the Senate Energy and Environment Committee and suggested that a great anniversary present would be clear direction to identify what needs to be done and how. ESAC makes the same suggestion today to the City of Ottawa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bill, and I understand that you've submitted that in writing as well. We have copies of those, so you had to race through quite a number of items that you spelled out very clearly for us. Do we have any members of the committee who wish to ask questions of Mr. Egerton? No. Seeing none, thank you very much for coming, and we'll move on to Rob Barnes with Ecology Ottawa.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me here today. I'm speaking on behalf of Ecology Ottawa. We represent tens of thousands of supporters across the city, and we take action on environmental issues as part of our mandate to make Ottawa the green capital of Canada. First, I'd like to thank city staff and councillors for their hard work on energy evolution. It's a good document, and there are a lot of great items in that document that we could take action on very quickly should there be the resources there to allow that. Unfortunately, following on what Bill Egerton said, we think the city's ambition is lacking when it comes to the budget aspect. The mayor, during his draft 2018 budget speak, spoke about $2 million under the Energy Evolution Initiative, which is great, but unfortunately only $500,000 of that money is new money. And as was discussed earlier by Steve Willis, it is earmarked for a variety of projects. Unfortunately, the terms of reference for the community energy initiatives piece is not yet defined. So really there's a broad question as to the extent to which that will actually reduce emissions. Overall, too, there is a broader question of how we're going to meet our targets. There are aggressive targets of an 80% reduction from 2012 levels by 2050, which is a steep cut. And if one were to look through the energy evolution document, one would see that only under an aggressive scenario do we get anywhere close to meeting those emissions reduction targets. So obviously, it's an urgent issue that requires upfront investment, not only on capital costs beyond the $500,000, but on operating costs, on additional staff money. Unfortunately, what we see with the 2018 draft budget looks like it continues a trend of underinvestment on this specific initiative. We have seen delays, unfortunately, due to the reorganization, and now we are seeing continued underinvestment in things like energy efficiency projects and other measures that would yield not only tangible benefits from a climate lens, but also benefit the city in the long run from energy savings. So energy evolution is really an opportunity to take action on a lot of areas. It's an opportunity not only to save money, but to generate more electricity and more energy locally, as well as to invest in the green jobs and innovation sector that will really power the economy of tomorrow. And so Ottawa is really well positioned to be at the forefront there, but we really need to see more money in terms of action. Ecology Ottawa was one of several groups from across the city, including the Federation of Citizens Associations, calling for a $1.5 million investment in energy evolution. That's $1.5 million in new money. And in the spring, last spring, our supporters met with 17 out of 23 councillors. So this was a citywide demand for strong action on climate change. We think that not only does City Council have the mandate, but also it's clear that there's widespread support for strong action. And so we urge City Council to make those ambitious moves and take those ambitious steps necessary to deliver on results sooner rather than later. The good news too is that in energy evolution we do see a list of 33 initiatives. So it's not like the work hasn't been done. A lot of community stakeholders and very intelligent people and hardworking staff have gone to the great effort of identifying a lot of those low-hanging measures that the city can take action on immediately. Unfortunately, we also see that the only item in the appendix that involves additional spending in 2018 is the Community Energy Innovation Project, which is ill-defined at this stage. So I think I'll wrap it up there just to say that the message is clear. We need stronger ambition, and I would urge this committee to consider that when voting on this budget as well as on the final budget. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rob. I know I already have one councillor who has questions for you, so please stay where you are. There we go. Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Rob, for coming down this morning and for articulating some concerns from Ecology Ottawa. I think you've been quite diplomatic with your, I'll say, criticism of sort of the lack of ambition from council in getting some of our strategic priorities really off the ground over the last couple of years. My colleague has put a motion on the floor to add dedicated staff to make sure that there are resources to see some of these projects through. I'm not sure that's the #1 priority. I'd like to see or hear your comment about more investment in the energy evolution strategy. You mentioned $500,000 as new money. I think a lot of us were expecting to see more. What is the #1 priority for Ecology Ottawa?
In terms of prioritization of the various, it's hard without a clear cost accounting in terms of the benefits from emission reductions that we'll see from the various line items. And in energy evolution, unfortunately, we do not see the proposed emission reduction by line item. So it's difficult to make that claim or make a claim in that area with great certainty. But one thing I would say is that the city, it's well known that the city does have a backlog of efficiency projects and has had one for some time, and has in fact been underestimating below the recommendations of city staff in energy efficiency projects for some time. And so one could easily imagine that an additional $1 million spent on energy efficiency projects citywide would not only move us towards our climate targets, but also yield benefits from a fiscal perspective down the road.
Is that $1 million total or $1 million in addition to the $500,000?
$1 million in addition to the
Okay.
$500,000.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next, Councillor McKinney.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for coming out. We all know the work that Ecology Ottawa does and how important it is to the city and to informing everybody in the city about the important work that we need to do as a municipality. I just want to pick up on what the question that Councillor Brockington asked. I just want to hear from you clearly. If there was additional resources, there's no doubt you were part of the stakeholder group that came up with the project recommendations that we see here under Energy Evolution. So with an additional $1 million, and as we go forward and as we, understand what the terms of reference will be for the Community Energy Initiative, in your estimation, $1.5 million is what we need to make sure that we're moving forward in reducing our GHG emissions today so that we don't have to catch up next term of council, the term of council after that. Is it your opinion that $1.5 million is the minimum that we need?
Yes, it is the minimum that we need. We can always do more. There are lots of opportunities for a greater ambition, obviously, and the scenario painted in the energy evolution document really portrays the fact that an aggressive scenario is required, and an aggressive scenario not only takes into account the city's actions, but also the broader market conditions and carbon pricing at other levels in other jurisdictions. So just from a City of Ottawa perspective, we think at least $1.5 million is needed to move the project forward and to do our fair share on climate change.
And that would be moving forward the, recommendations under this plan.
That's right, yeah.
Yes.
The recommendations are identified. What we need is additional money to move up the dates of implementation for a lot of those items that require additional spending.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have Councillor Nussbaum, then Leeper, then Cloutier.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, my questions were already asked, so I can withdraw my name. Thank you, and thank you for coming this morning.
Thank you for your contribution to efficiency. There we So that was Leeper. Next.
Thank you, Chair. Just a little bit more precision on that. That $1.5 million isn't necessarily some arbitrary figure. It's 3 times more than what we're proposing. There are some specific recommendations that have been made in the past that you would like to see advanced. Can you give us some color around that and what the benefit would be of advancing some of those projects?
Yeah, so there are a number of items that have been identified, and as I said, it's difficult to say, which item needs to take priority over another one, given the fact that there isn't an idea as to exactly how much each would reduce emissions. But the city flagged a number of items. Efficiency projects are one area in which the city would retrieve money over the long term. And also, we do understand that buildings make up the largest footprint in the city at 49% of the city's emissions. So obviously, that's a major area to tackle, and it's something that we have yet to be done. We are waiting on additional pathway analyses that will be conducted as part of phase 2 of energy evolution. But in terms of phase 1, there are still efficiency measures that can be undertaken given the study that we have. Another concrete item where the city could invest additional money for what we see as a fairly substantial return in terms of emission reductions is on district energy. District energy being a case in which the energy systems of buildings are linked, and that also efficiency from a multi-building scenario. And in Ottawa, of course, we're particularly well poised to take action on that because of the footprint of the federal government in the downtown core. So we understand that that's been under work for some time, but we see consistent lack of investment in staffing dollars, and the reorganization means that we're not as far ahead as we would have liked to be at this stage. And so we, based on consultations with experts as well as city staff, we came up with the figure of $1.5 million as being the minimum investment to drive forward some of those items that could have tangible returns. Other groups like the Ottawa Renewable Energy Cooperative have a very detailed analysis of net metering programs and district energy and exactly the types of benefits that they would see from those. I don't have those numbers in front of me, but perhaps when Janice Ashworth speaks later today, she will be able to provide you with that information.
Thanks, and I do hope we'll hear from Janice, not just what the environmental benefits of moving ahead with those initiatives are going to be, but what the savings could be to the city, which I think is a critical piece of this. If you had that $0.5 million that you were seeking, how much of that would you anticipate going into staff? Councillor McKenney has proposed reallocating some of the $500,000 that is in there to fund, I think, 2 FTEs. If you had 1.5, would it still be 2 FTEs that you're looking for, or more? Or?
Yeah, good question. I mean, so when I talk about 1.5, I'm talking about the capital budget. So it would be we're not only looking for $1.5 million in additional money for projects, but also additional staffing. At the very least, an improvement beyond what we've seen with 2 FTEs. And currently, you know, I didn't touch too much on the capital budget, but all we see right now is an additional $5,000 for the 2018 budget, which is clearly not enough given the pace of action so far. We're behind in terms of our pathway analysis. Energy evolution has been broken into 2 phases with some implementation starting in 2020. So, and climate change doesn't wait for anyone, right? We've got 2050 a hard deadline, and we're already starting with one foot behind.
So would the, you know, I think some of us will consider whether or not Councillor McKenney's proposal to reallocate needed dollars for projects into is necessarily the right one. I am tempted to believe that, you know, getting those staff in there and focused now will pay long-term dividends. But what is your view on Councillor McKenney's motion?
I think it's a helpful motion. I think that's right that we do need staff to drive the process. But I think there's a broader question in terms of the budget allocation for this line item over time. So maybe, you know, I don't have experience in terms of assessing whether the additional money in staff versus the additional money in projects will yield more or less benefits, but my understanding is that we haven't taken action on a number of items like leveraging other funds because we've underinvested in staff so far. So I do see it as kind of saving the ship in the but the broader challenge remains, and the broader challenge is one of sustained investment over the long term.
That's very helpful. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And Councillor Cloutier.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci, Monsieur Burns et à Écologie Ottawa pour votre travail. Appreciate your presentation and all the work that you do. In the environment that we're in, are there any of the strategic initiatives that are in the budget documents or other programs to which you attach less importance that you would like to see money allocated from so that we could support the proposal, the extra $1.5 million? And I know it's not an easy question, but in terms of prioritizing.
Yeah. In terms of prioritizing, I mean, we were a little bit confused when we did see the capital budget to see $500,000 associated with green fleet. It's not to say that greening the city's fleet is unimportant, but that this is a transportation initiative and that the city should really be applying a climate lens to all of its procurement. It's strange that this has been lumped into, now called energy evolution by the mayor in the last speech, when really it's doing something the city should have been doing all along. So that is one item that struck me as strange, but you know, it remains an important initiative. So it's difficult for me to say, you know, take a $500,000 for green fleet and put it into other initiatives. The fundamental problem is one of underinvestment rather than reallocating the current level of investment.
And in that underinvestment, as you characterize it, can you give us any advice or opinion, again, in the environment that we're in, advice or opinion as to how this council could do that?
I do think that Councillor McKenney's motion is helpful. Based on,
but it's just a reallocation.
Yeah, and it's based on you know, obviously City Council has a better grasp in terms of the day-to-day processes of the city and how additional money could be more useful in one pot than another. I unfortunately don't have that level of expertise. So in terms of the, it is a challenge to say pull money from one item and give it to another. But I do think I do trust the judgment. In terms of saying that an additional investment of staff could be useful, because we do see, as I said, a history of problems in terms of being able to leverage existing funding opportunities, especially given the policy alignment that we currently see at the 3 jurisdictional levels in terms of focus on climate change and funding for various projects that are climate related. We're not sure how long this window will stay open.
Chair, can I ask a related question, but to staff? Or would you rather not?
Well, I'd rather not at this
Very
point.
well.
Yeah, we
We'll-
can
we'll
clarify.
wait.
If you can note things that you'd like to
Of course.
clarify later,
Thank
we
you.
can do that then.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Seeing no other questions for Mr. Barnes, thank you very much for appearing today and for your helpful input. Janice Ashworth, please, representing the Chamber of Commerce Sustainability Committee. Welcome, Janice.
Good morning, committee. Thank you for inviting us to speak today. The Chamber of Commerce welcomes the release of the City of Ottawa's Energy Evolution Strategy, Phase 1. The business world experiences daily the urgent impacts of climate change. We believe the city is well placed to make smart investments necessary to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in Ottawa, while taking advantage of opportunities to generate local jobs, stop the export of energy dollars, and create more resilient and sustainable Ottawa. We would like to congratulate those who contributed to the Phase 1 of the Energy Evolution. This document is the product of thousands of hours of hard work by both community stakeholders and city staff, and it compiles a list of interesting projects and policies to reduce Ottawa's corporate and community emissions. However, our concern lies with the budget and the timelines, as has been discussed today. Even if fully implemented, Phase 1 only gets us 18% of the way to the city's own reduction targets. The City of Ottawa committed to greenhouse gas reductions of 80% below 2012 levels by 2050. We hold out high hopes that the city will dramatically increase its commitment and funding to this strategy in order to achieve those targets. This budget is inadequate. The presentation of the draft budget suggests that was allocated to energy evolution, as has been discussed. However, only $500,000 of that is actually for implementing the energy evolution plan, while $500,000 is for buying cars, which really should be from the transportation budget, not from this committee. And $1 million of the is for city building upgrades, which actually a few years ago was cut back significantly. So that's just an ongoing piece that's been in your budget. The Ottawa Commerce, Ottawa Renewable Energy Co-op, Ecology Ottawa, and 5 other of the councillors have been on record requesting that $1.5 million of new money be allocated to energy evolution as part of the 2018 budget. The current funding proposal falls well short of the amount required to respond to the climate crisis, and it will in fact only achieve one of the 33 identified actions in the energy evolution strategy. Cars be funded through energy evolution funding is demonstrative that City Hall is internally inconsistent. Why should the Environment Committee need to be in charge of vehicle procurement to ensure that energy-efficient cars are purchased? Everyone in the business world knows that electric vehicles are an inevitable part of the energy transition and a key component to meeting greenhouse gas reduction targets locally and nationally. In fact, there's a whole pathway report as part of the energy evolution strategy dedicated to electric vehicles. Such long-term conservation-minded thinking should be part of all departments at City Hall. A sustainability score office, as we called it in our letter before the budget was released, or a smart energy office, as it's called in the energy evolution strategy, action item number 31, would ensure that all departments make decisions in line with achieving the 80% greenhouse gas reduction target. Staffing levels is my next topic. They have been and are projected to be inadequate for rapid and effective implementation. Phase 1 could have been more thoroughly implemented had it been adequately prioritized with continuous staffing. Reallocation of key people and inadequate staff numbers has been cited as a reason that the Energy Evolution Phase 1 was only partway to completion. This does not include new full-time staff positions, as has been discussed. So this represents a missed opportunity at a time when opportunity costs are high. Policy alignment at the provincial and federal level has never been better. There's tens of millions of dollars in climate money that could be leveraged from other public sources, not to mention the private funds that are ready and willing to invest in energy efficiency if the City of Ottawa is well positioned to take advantage. We've seen reports from the Green Economy Network suggesting that 26,000 jobs are possible through leveraging of up to $2 billion in sustainable energy initiatives, and that is in line with what we've seen from Amazon, the Amazon possibility as well. We urge the Environment Committee to take immediate action to remedy the inadequate budget. 2 immediate possible actions could be adding an additional $1 million into energy evolution before the final budget is presented on December 13th, and secure additional permanent staffing for this important and transformative project. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Janice. Questions, Councillor Leeper?
Thank you very much, Janice. A couple of questions for you. First, Councillor McKenney's motion would reallocate some of the money that's within the energy evolution to staff. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, it's an interesting one that I was thinking of once I heard that motion. I think staff are key because of the significant funding that's available from the different levels of government and from private funds. So staff are key to taking advantage of and leveraging those larger pots of money. $200,000 can't go very far, but it can leverage a lot. So I think if you focus that staff time on really taking advantage of the other pots of money, that would be an adequate or a useful way to spend those dollars. I think it's important to look at the list of 33 actions and think about which ones we can move out of this sort of purgatory position that they're in by allocating some time to them. And most of them just require staff time, which would enable them to move forward. So that money allocated to either full-time staff or I think a lot of these items will require interdepartmental linkages, so maybe some time from financial and legal departments to enable a lot of the policy initiatives that are identified in these action items would be an adequate spending of that money, some secondment time or some linkages between departments.
Rob, thank you, and that's very helpful. Rob mentioned that there are projects that we could undertake that would actually achieve an ROI over say the midterm. And that by not pursuing those, we are imposing an opportunity cost on ourselves. I know this is a field in which you work extensively. Can you give us an idea of some of what is in the hopper that we're not doing because we're not funding to the $1.5 million that advocates and other councillors have sought?
Right, yeah, thanks for the question. That's an important one. As Rob mentioned, energy efficiency in buildings is your number one bang for buck in terms of dollars saved, keeping energy dollars local, and greenhouse gas reductions. Toronto, they have a suite of programs for energy efficiency in large buildings as well as residential that we could pick and choose their suite of options and say, let's take one of those programs and implement it here as a starting point. In our letter from the Chamber of Commerce, we 6 actions. That was number 1 because of its importance. We had suggested the tower program, tower renewal program. They also have a high-rise program as well as a few others, better building partnership programs. So there's a number of them that could be, and I can't speak to the details of all of them, but I'm sure that someone from staff in Toronto could certainly hold hands with someone here to walk them through that implementation. That's where your financial and legal departments will also need to be brought online or on board, right? So I think something like that would be a really effective way to start. Just in terms of savings, what your own city staff have identified is that just from heat pumps and electric vehicles over their life, you can see savings of up to $40 million in today's energy dollars, just from the pathways that have already been done, right? So we're not, $200,000 is a very modest amount of money, but if we can use it to leverage savings as well as other public money, then we're talking about the effectiveness that the city can have. And as you've heard me say many times before, there is significant amount of private dollars looking to put money into solar, wind, energy efficiency. They want to be doing good with this private money. So thinking of a way to leverage with those private investors as well, I think is something that the city can take as an innovation lens.
But that's another reason why we should have more staff focused on pursuing those kinds of opportunities.
With those particular skill sets and objectives, right, yes.
Fantastic. I will leave it there. Thank you very much, Janice.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Egley?
Much. So you had made the comment that you thought that the greening of the fleet should be not part of this committee, but part of Transportation Committee, which is my committee, so that's why I'm asking the question. So just for clarity, are you suggesting that we take the dollars from the environment budget and shift it over to the transportation budget? Or are you suggesting we leave all the dollars that are currently in the environment budget and find new dollars in the transportation budget,
right.
As well as taking over the responsibility?
I'm glad you asked. Thank you, Councillor Eglai, because I didn't have time in my 5 minutes, but I have a suggestion, which is keep the $500,000 here and use it to...
I was suspecting that was your answer.
Yeah, I'm sure you were. But I'll go a bit further, which is, we're saying got to find another $1 million, right? And so half of that could be the $500,000 that's being used for transportation currently in this committee. So where transportation could potentially find more money, electric vehicles have savings over time, right? So they're actually going to pay themselves off just through reduced cost and operational costs. But up front, I'll refer to my colleagues at the Sustainable Transportation Coalition, but they've identified that parking rates downtown haven't increased in the past 5 years, whereas ridership rates for
Right.
OC
We've
Transpo...
actually dealt with that. They actually have changed.
Okay, thank you for the update. Ridership rates for OC Transpo have increased dramatically, right? So maybe there's an equalization that comes, and there's some capital dollars available from that, for example.
Okay. Well, you've pulled in another whole committee there as well. So that's transit, which would have to deal with the fares. Transportation doesn't deal with the fares. So
Thankfully, you're on both committees.
I am on, but I'm not going to speak for the chair of the Transit Commission. So for your plan to work, you're talking about a shuffling of money between 3 different budgets in effect.
We're just speaking to the objective here. How it gets implemented is, I'll leave that up to the smart folks in the room here.
Well, and I appreciate that, but we also look for the community to provide us with suggestions as to how to make it happen. And fundamentally, I think the issue here is that there's an ask for $1.5 million that are currently not in the budget, notwithstanding Councillor McKenney's motion, which would shift dollars. And I'll have some questions for staff about that. Fundamentally, you're asking for staff to come up with a way to create not 100, but $1.5 million more dollars. So my question to you is, what are your suggestions for creating, not shifting money, because then you're just robbing Peter to pay Paul, but what are your suggestions for actually creating $1.5 million more or new dollars that Marion Simlick and her team can look at and try and figure out how to disperse that?
Mm-hmm. I guess 2 ideas off the cuff here, recognizing that the caveat is that I've particularly looked at this part of the budget. You've looked at the whole thing, presumably, so with that caveat in mind, at the Budget Speak event that was hosted by a number of the councillors here on the committee, the stakeholders in that room said, yes, 97% of them said they wanted that $1.5 million for this initiative, and they would like to see that money come out of the roads budget, reduce spending on road allocations, on road widening, and put that towards energy efficiency. That was what the stakeholders in that room.
Again, that's not new money. I asked you about new money.
New money, I've suggested that there
are
other pots of public money from the feds in the province that are significant in nature and could easily more than make up that reduction or that increase of $1 million.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cloutier.
Just to your last point, just a précision that a lot of the federal and provincial money requires a matching investment from the municipality.
Much of it requires matching in-kind contributions, so that could be considered staff time contributions. But there's a number of different pots available, yes.
All right. Thank you very much. Seeing no other questions, Janice, thank you for coming. I know that a number of the points that have been raised by delegations to this point, we're chomping at the bit to hear staff's response to those, but the rules we usually follow is we'll wait. They're taking notes, I see that, and so we'll certainly follow up on some of those ideas and some of the questions that have been raised very shortly. So representing Federation of Citizens Associations, we have Angela Keller-Herzog and Sheila Perry. Given that they had a number of members who might have asked to speak, but they've consolidated them, I have agreed to offer extra time to the pair of you to speak on behalf of your members.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for this opportunity to speak. And this is a joint effort from us. So with the FCA and the Cafés Ottawa, the FCA is a forum of citizens association and nonprofit volunteer groups in Ottawa, and member associations share information about issues and take joint action. And to that means in our most recent meeting, we looked at this whole issue, and of course the budget element is really important, and we've heard a good deal today, and we'll be repeating a little bit, but there are some common themes here. So the Cafés Ottawa, Community Associations for Environmental Sustainability, was founded in 2010. And it's a forum for representatives of community and residents associations to meet, exchange, and engage with the City of Ottawa on environmental issues. And so in our most recent meeting, and Angela will be dealing with this, there are a number of common themes that have arisen. And a lot of this is through community associations. So at our October meeting, we looked at the budget for the input, and yeah, there we go. Okay, so we resolved to urge the Mayor and Council to adequately resource ongoing renewable energy strategy work, which is a term of Council priority. So we were looking at how that is doing and how do we really evaluate that and see in our progress. We recognize the importance of climate change, and we were looking at cities across the country as examples. And we've heard some examples of other cities today. But this is really important when you're looking at best practices. And the bottom line is the plan and a team. And that's what we've also heard today, where staff or that allocation of resources is really important. So the next area here touches on some of the budgets, and we've heard some of this earlier, where we feel we see that the 500,000 of new funding is important. Motion in October dealt with the 1.5 million recommendation, which in terms of the recommendations, project funding that would include local counterpart funding for accessing and leveraging provincial and federal climate change dollars. The operational part, and we've heard about the staff element, and it is a critical element to make things happen. So the permanent staff or part-time resources and professional consultants as necessary. And then allocating this 1.5 of hydro dividends annually, which can be pulled back into the works and the operations. Just moving on, the accountability area and the strategic priorities we're all familiar with. Those actions are really critical, and the targets to go with that. The benefits, and we've heard also earlier how that can be such a benefit coming back in renewable generation of energy, et cetera. And net carbon zero energy retrofitting, connecting Ottawa's strengths and IT, and the leveraging at the provincial, federal, and Federation of Canadian Municipalities with all sorts of funding. So finally, looking at, we realize the LRT is it's a major endeavor, but we also see that these areas of strategic priorities are very important, and the allocation of the money for these outcomes, or trying to achieve these outcomes and targets, it's very important as we move forward in this 2018 budget. Thank you, and over to Angela.
Okay, thank you very much for having us. Okay, so I've got around 5 minutes. That's perfect. Thank you, Sheila. So Sheila is the president of the FCA. I'm, as a community association representative, a member of the FCA, and also part of the Cafés group. The Cafés group is really the Greenpoint people. So these are people from all parts of the city that take a pretty passionate interest in these things, take the time to read these long supporting documents, and then meet on Sundays over light refreshments. So I'm going to take you a little bit into the weeds. Where's that slide? Okay. You'll notice that we're all singing from the same songbook. That's because we're looking at the same documents and the same issues. So I'm going to try to unpack, and there will be a little bit of overlap with what others have said. So we had the renewable energy strategy in 2015 being announced as a term of council priority. 2016, we had some really good consultation work, creating a sounding board with over 100 stakeholders. So that was actually work that's going to benefit us, I think, well into the medium run. 2017, now we're seeing the work, which focuses on renewable energy generation. The phase 2 work is actually where the mass of greenhouse gas emissions are located with buildings and transportation sector. And we haven't really heard much about that, using the pathways work, there's be work on energy modeling that can determine actually where to prioritize our efforts in the medium and long term in terms of investments. And that is really going to be the map or the strategy for reducing the greenhouse gas, getting our long-term target. So that last piece really is our strategic energy plan. So we should look at those 3 pieces together as the deliverable for the renewable energy strategy. No, I need to go. Okay, so let's unpack the phase 1 stuff. We have heard that there's 33 short-term actions that are proposed. We have heard that 1 out of the 33 is funded, which is the Community Energy Innovation Fund. 15 of the proposed short-term actions, specifically by the staff recommendations in front of you, will not proceed until securing community external or additional resources, which includes Action 31 for the Smart Energy Office, which you heard the Chief of Commerce also remarking that would be a really useful thing to have. And then 16 by my count, and I counted like 5 times, because the councillor's office was saying 19, and then earlier we actually heard that 27 of the proposed actions can be funded out of existing resources. Now, the thing about existing resources, that basically means that existing staff are supposed to be working on it, but we know that there's no full-time dedicated staff allocated to work on this. We know that there's a patchwork of part-time, seconded people, and they've been working, I think, really, really hard over the summer to deliver this report. But the same patchwork of staff are supposed to deliver phase 2, and they're also supposed to manage new projects that result from the successful partnership proposals. So in terms of all this work, and realizing that even delivering the renewable energy strategy that we're looking at, we've only got like 1/3, right? The other 2 pieces aren't here yet. So we've had lack of capacity to deliver the full deliverable on a timely basis, and we really think this is because there's a critical shortage of staff. So let me go forward again. Sorry, I keep flipping backwards instead. So what we would recommend to deal with this critical gap in delivery capacity would be, as Councillor McKenney has suggested, to shift some resources. Our suggestion is actually to shift 250,000 in resources from the capital budget, the Community Energy Innovation Fund, towards operational budget so that we can then staff the Smart Energy Office. Now, part of the rationale is that the terms of reference for the fund have not been defined yet. They need to be defined, then they need to be approved, and then you need to start putting out the RFPs, and you need to start filling your pipeline. Now, you can't just say 11 days later, come to us with a proposal. You have to open the window for a while, and it takes time to do these things. It takes time to negotiate tripartite partnership agreements. So before we're actually in a position to disperse from this fund, some months, if not years, are going to go by. So in terms of how can we find a workable solution that will help us deliver and make this strategy a success, we would ask you to consider this constructive recommendation to shift funds so that we can have some FTEs and we can have a staffed smart energy office. It'll stop there with this fairly clear
Time is up.
recommendation.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions? Councillor Egley?
First of all, I wanted to thank the delegation, and this is sort of a heads up to staff, the suggestion around the hydro dividend. And so I can't ask you questions about that, particularly as to how that might or might not work, but I have some questions for staff about that. And goes to your, if I can call it modification on Councillor McKenney's motion, you've added or suggested an additional $50,000. Now, assuming that there was no new money, so to speak, and no shifting around other than within the existing budget, do you still think that's the way to go? In other words, if this committee doesn't change the total dollar amount, do you still think that the best way to use the dollars that we have is to shift some of that into staffing positions?
Absolutely. And, you know, I managed multi-million-dollar projects. I've been a program manager. In terms of those little bullets, in terms of those deliverables, that's huge. To deliver phase 2, to do the solid analytical work, to do the stakeholder engagement, and then to produce a report that's produced and translated and has appropriate lags for senior management to review. I think you need a team of people for that alone. But then you're also supposed to be delivering short-term actions. Well, who's going to be on top of that? Oh, other people. But the thing is, you can only task people with already full-time jobs and busy people with additional stuff so far. So I think you actually need a team of 5 people plus an experienced manager. So this compromise of saying, well, maybe we can find 250,000 is it's a crisis, so let's try to deal with it. But I think you need the team of 5 at least, plus the manager.
Okay, no, thank you for that. So you're in favor of Councillor McKenney's motion. You just think it's underfunded. She should have asked for more money.
I strongly support Councillor McKenney's motion, and okay. I'm very grateful that she's put it forward.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, Councillor Brockington? Yeah.
Did the FCA speak to staff directly on funding? Because I really hope, at the end of the day, when this committee approves this budget, that we don't have 95% of our discussion on how many staff we should assign to this portfolio. But did you ask staff directly how are they going to achieve their 33 project list? They've basically made the assumption that they can get it done. Otherwise, they would have put more FTEs in the budget. I think it's very questions for you to ask and question about, well, it's been underfunded thus far. How are you going to implement this successfully? But what type of conversation have you had prior to today on the staffing levels?
That's a very good question. Unfortunately, we have not had that longer term conversation. And maybe I just go back to sort of the formation of all our groups, and it's just the fact that we've got Green Space Alliance, part of us, our capacity of meetings, as Angela's mentioned, we're together on a Sunday as volunteers. So I would say this is a great opportunity. We'd happily look at an opportunity to have that dialogue.
And we are going to have that in about 5 minutes, so stay tuned.
Okay. Thank you.
Possibly in about 30 seconds, depending on whether I have other questions for this delegation. Seeing none, let's have that discussion. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
So given that I may have about 8 or 10 councillors asking the same question, I'm going to take the chair's prerogative at this point as we move to questions of staff. The question of staffing, of adequate human resources in order to be able to do the work that has been set, that we assume going to be accepting and approving in maybe half an hour's time or more, when we actually get the energy evolution strategy, but other specific items that are part of the budget. I would ask the simple question, do we have the staff capacity to do that work? Is there a plan for how to get that? And is it a matter of new human resources as opposed to new tasks being part of existing staff's job descriptions? So perhaps that would help us as we move forward with our questions.
So, Mr. Chair, I think the simple answer to this question is simply because I need to go through an inventory with you of all the different parts of the organization that are working on the climate change file, either directly or indirectly. So the Recreational Cultural Group, RCVS department, has the BEAM project, which is working on bringing technology and innovation on our facilities and our buildings, automation to reduce energy demand, changing out the boiler system in all of our facilities. They're working with us in our department on negotiations with the federal government on options for potential district energy, so that's ongoing. In corporate services, we have the fleet group, which is looking at the procurement of green fleet elements across the organization and involved in it. Planning, infrastructure, and economic the department I'm responsible for. We have the policy setting role. We also have project management and public consultation support for phase 2, which is part of it. And the infrastructure services group is working continually on projects that are actually in the capital budgets and other departments that involve building envelope renewals and replacements of systems that are part of the building budgets that are separate. So we have mechanical, electrical engineers, building engineers are all part of it. We have expertise in transportation services on the mobility programs and also as it supports the transit programs. We have expertise from Hydro Ottawa, which is generously provided to us to support any initiative we would because of their expertise in energy demand management. The Ottawa Community Housing in its portfolio is doing an enormous investment in reducing its energy demand in its operations because that any dollar you can save in energy in that portfolio allows them to do other work. So significant investment on that area. The planning policy group is participating in the Tower Renewal Project with the cities of Toronto and Hamilton. The city manager's office has set up a team that reviews all federal and provincial funding asks that are out there and verifies that we're indeed submitting for these. And there was actually a program that was closed last week. We provided 13 applications as it related to this area, and that program was funded from the proceeds of CAP. We are making those submissions. So we have a large workforce. I think what our intention, particularly with the Smart Energy Office, was the idea of bringing in the financial lens with the facilities management lens and trying to grind down that energy bill we pay every year. That bill is a number that should come down, both from a greenhouse gas reductions point of view and just fiscal management perspective. So that was the idea, the concept behind the sort of adding to what BEAM already does, which is really the technology aspect of it and bringing the financial measures on. So I think we're going to continue to move the projects forward with the resources we have, and within the fiscal environment we're in, that the most out of everything we can do. And I think it is a multidisciplinary approach across multiple departments.
Thank you very much. And one last question or clarification then before we go out to the other members of the committee. I'm already getting that list then. I've had conversations with you in the past few days because this was a critique we've received from many people, and rightly so, because it is at least a perception that the city is understaffed and perhaps under-expertised in some of these areas. My understanding is you and other managers, for the most part, with some areas to fill in, believe that we have the resources. It's going to be more a matter of clarity, job descriptions, and where necessary, finding particular expertise. Can you characterize that in one sentence or two?
I agree with the point you made. I'll just give you an example from our own department, whereby putting the environmental policy group, which is part of long-range planning with economic development, we have an economic development group who has expertise with grant programs, runs several of them already, and they also need to be focused on green job creation. And that's part of what they're supposed to do. So we're trying to leverage resources from other groups to have a higher level of outcome.
I don't want to abuse my prerogative as chair. Let's go to committee members then. I have already Councillors Eggleston, Brockington, McKinney, and Cloutier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So in a discussion by one of the delegations around Councillor McKee, whether it should be 200,000, 250,000, part of the rationale given was it would create a pipeline of work. So as we go forward and find funding to add additional resources, additional staff, we need projects that they can work on, or we're going to continue to be behind. I'm wondering if you could comment. That sounded like a very sound argument to me to start filling that pipeline, because these things do take time. I'm wondering if you could comment on that.
I think the suggestion was offered in genuine spirit of cooperation from people we've been working with all along, and I don't have a fundamental objection to making that change. We will adapt accordingly with council's will, and just basically putting the community program back a little bit and putting resources. But I think we, as a management team, and I would ask that perhaps the treasurer may want to add, want to look at this issue of our management of our energy spending and demand on a corporate level. And we've just started working to get our heads around how we can bring those numbers down. And this could prioritize that initiative, but we are looking at this on a corporation-wide level with that lens.
Okay. Ms. Simwick, I sort of gave you a heads up about this. So the suggestion to find new money, if you will, by way of a diverting a portion of the hydro dividend, or perhaps increasing the hydro dividend. I guess a two-part question is, procedurally, can we do that? And legally, can we do that? And if the answers to both those questions are yes, what's the process we would need to follow?
So my understanding of the direction that the advisory committee was endorsing was that if there was surplus in the account, which means you're not changing the budget for the Ottawa Hydro dividend. The amount of the Ottawa Hydro dividend was actually set through your shareholders' declaration, so that's exactly what's in the budget. But the idea would be, for example, right now the budget is $20 million. If we got a dividend of $21 million, the $1 million at year end would then be directed towards one of these environmental initiative capital projects, as opposed to being used, right now it's being used as part of, it offsets, if there's a surplus there, it offsets deficits in other areas. So in effect, you'd be restricting where those funds could go at the end of the year. So you're not changing the budget. You're not changing the shareholder declaration. What you are doing is you're policy direction to staff about any surplus use in that particular account. That is a FEDCO issue, because that is a year-end accounting issue, and that would be where that policy would have to be directed from.
So in short, what you're saying is you don't think we should be talking about this as part of the budget process?
There's no recommendation to change the budget. It's surplus. So it's dealing with an actual, which is a year-end account close procedure. At the end of the year, we have a number of accounts where you have directed us. If there's a surplus in there, it's not to fall to the bottom line. It is to be used for X, Y, or Z. So that's what we do. This would follow in along with that. We would get direction from you, and we would follow that as a part of our year-end close process.
And that would have to be something we'd have to revisit each year then, I assume, depending on what the surplus, depending on what you'd have to get renewed direction each year to divert it in that particular way?
No, if you give us direction and that's your term of council direction and you enshrine it in a policy, then we just follow it. It doesn't have to be revisited every year. It just becomes part of how we do the year-end close.
Okay, that's very helpful. One, I think it was the first delegation raised the potential for a tax credit of some sort for maintaining healthy trees or planting trees on your property. Again, sort of the same line of questioning. Is that feasible? Is that something we could manage? And if so, sort of what are the steps we would have to go through to make that happen?
Off the top of my head, it really wouldn't be a tax credit. You'd be giving a grant. And because you don't want the administrative burden of basically of giving a tax credit would be huge. Okay. You'd have
thousands of applications, and then you'd have to go out and inspect those properties. Are those trees healthy? Unless you're going to just assume that anybody can apply for it and you're going to trust that, in fact, they have trees on their property. But you really, what you want is a grant program, and you want to make one that actually is, doesn't require a lot of administration. Going out and inspecting properties is a lot of work. I would suggest there was one gentleman here was talking about making trees cheaper. That's a more efficient way of delivering if you want increased forest coverage than actually having staff go out and inspect properties and looking at trees to determine if they're healthy.
That's sort of where I was going, but I was going to send it over to Kevin. So Kevin, right now, what's our policy? Residents can ask for trees to be planted, can they not?
We do. We have a Trees and Trust program.
Okay, so how would that be different from what again, I believe it was the first delegation that suggested?
Chair, I think the difference is years ago we had a tree giveaway program, which we discontinued, and actually ESAC has asked us to take a look at revitalizing that program. So that would be making available trees in anywhere. The Trees and Trust programs planted in the right-of-way in front of
So ESAC has said a resident come forward and say, I think you should plant a tree in the park or whatever. Is that what you're saying? Or do we simply hand the tree over to the resident and then the resident is responsible for planting it?
Correct, Chair. The resident would plant it in their backyard or wherever they deem suitable.
Okay. And what are the challenges to go back to something like that?
Chair, we'd have to look at it. I think there were some distribution challenges, if I recall correctly, but something we'll take a fulsome look at and we'll report back to the advisory committee and memo to committee and council.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a number of questions. They're going to be all over the map, so just bear with me. I'll start with get into the budget documents, capital side. I have a number of questions regarding natural area acquisition within the urban core and rural area, pages 29 and 30 of the capital side. Talk to me about, we're investing more on the rural side and the urban side. Just talk to me about the strategies here. I'm just concerned about rural may have a little more natural area than the urban core, and is it the priority of the city to try and save or maintain more in the urban versus rural? Just talk to me about the overall strategy.
So I'll try to be brief. I mean, I think it's a bit of a reality of geography that our rural area represents 75% of the landmass of the city. And what we are really focusing in on is where we've identified environmentally significant in our official plan. It's protecting the areas that have been identified through the planning process. And we're trying to protect those that are vulnerable to change. So some of the, you can imagine the urban boundary is an area of intense focus for us, and the area just on the urban boundary, just understanding that putting lands into public trusteeship, either through us or through one of the conservation authorities or some other body, is a term planning strategy. So I think it is more of a function of inside the urban boundary, our land use planning process gets a lot of this land dedicated to us through parkland dedications in development, but outside in those other areas, we have to be more proactive to go and purchase it.
And again, those budget lines are small just because of limited resources?
I believe it's a fund that has been built up and dipped into on a regular basis as demand comes forward. I think it has been correlated to the number of transactions we typically tend to do historically. And if there was an extraordinary situation with a very large parcel that we had an opportunity to come forward opportunistically, I would imagine we'd come to council separately for separate authority outside the annual budget process for it if some really something big and special came along.
I've been told recently that the NCC may be taking a more assertive review or approach to its lands that are deemed surplus to their needs. And that always raises concerns with me because there may be opportunities for the city to retain lands that are deemed, I guess, in the best interest of our residents. Have you had any recent discussions with the NCC, or have they confirmed whether or not they're going to be looking at a more comprehensive, I guess, disposal strategy of lands in the Ottawa area? And then what would the city's role be? Are we offered first opportunity to lands before they go on the open market? How does that process work?
So, Mr. Chair, I'll have to go back to my previous existence to help answer some of those questions, but there are no ongoing discussions right now immediately, although there is because we're always requiring land for various projects, we're often discussing where we have opportunities to swap as opposed to trade cash between each other. I mean, imagine, for example, the bridge at Fifth Avenue, we need land for that. The NCC, in order to dispose of land, presumably is going, as they've said in the past, are going to be updating their review of their what they call their national interest landmass to identify what's truly of federal interest. I can't comment beyond that role. I think they should speak to where they're at on that process. It has been their practice in the past that when they choose to dispose of land, they initially offer it to public agencies at the federal, municipal, provincial level for first call. So that's been their practice in the past.
Mr. Chair, just maybe to plant a seed with you, if the city could do some outreach with the NCC and at any time in 2018 to have maybe an information update to this committee for the NCC reviewing its plans, just to give us a courtesy heads up, I'd appreciate that and just leave that with you. Pages 29 and 31 talk about the deficits in revenue because of the lack, or not the lack, but the reduction of water consumption by residents due to the wet summer. The loss in revenues is significant, but you have two different pages. One is deficit in water revenues due to wet summer, resulting in reduced volume of water consumed and billed. The other is deficit mainly due to less sewer surcharge revenues due to reduced water revenues. It's about $10 million in reduction. There are some savings because there's less operating costs to service that water consumption. Are we planning correctly? Are we estimating correctly, given that consumption continues to go down over many years? And if wet summers are the trend, just because of changes in climate, are we adequately taking this into account? Revenue side, because again, revenues have consistently taken a hit over the medium term.
So I'm going to ask for help from the treasurer on this issue, because part of this was discussed through the long-range financial plan, and one of the things, as I understand the background to this, is we periodically review a multi-year series of data on water usage and including these climate effects to it, and we update the long-range financial plan accordingly based on those trends we've seen, and that review was done reasonably recently. So
when you say last year, you mean 2016? When you say there was a drought, you mean 2016? Okay, all right. Is it possible for staff to, within the next couple weeks, identify the bottom $1 million, the bottom $1.5 million on the priority scale, to give members of this committee an idea where if we wanted to consider transferring money from one budget line to another, if we wanted to, for example, prop up the Energy Evolution Fund, we want your professional opinion on, I mean, this budget is your list of priorities. There's got to be top, medium, and low priorities within that budget. Are you able to articulate, like I said, the bottom $1 million, $1.5 million? Is that doable?
I think your suggestion that we go back and look at that and bring that back through a memo is probably the best approach, because I would like to consult my colleagues.
Okay, that's fair. I've got some other lower end questions. I'm going to yield the floor to my colleagues, but I would like to come back at the end, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next on the list is Councillor McKinney.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to ask a couple of questions about staffing. I just want to start by saying I do know, and I just want to recognize how hard staff work at the city, and I believe that every one of our employees here is working flat out every day. So I just want to talk about the staffing that you identified that is working holistically, across the corporation on energy initiatives. I take it those same staff were here 2, 3, 4 years ago. They're not new positions. They're staff that were here, say, in 2014.
Yes.
And there's no new additional staff in this budget being allocated towards the Smart Energy Office.
That's correct, because the intention was in the next couple of months at the management team level, we would actually look at the mandate and organization and pull from whichever departments the required resources. And it may be a virtual office. It may not need to be a physical office. It may be, 10% of one person's time, 15% of another person's. And this is an initiative we're taking on at the senior management level.
Okay, but just to be clear, this is not additional staffing. This is taking people who are already doing various jobs across a corporation and asking them to do something additional.
I think I would characterize it as ensuring that people who have different skill sets, people in the business of saving money in finance, for example, focus on the energy file as a targeted area to save money, working with people who are in the building engineering and building management side as well, and other groups. So I'd see it as pulling different expertise to focus and try to hack a problem we have.
I guess the rhetorical question then is, why hasn't that been done for the past 4 years? We have slowly come up with a strategy that was supposed to be implemented in this term of council. It's unless we do something now, it's not going to be. We'll be asking residents to, take a chance on us in 2019 going forward. So it's not something that I'm interested in doing. Can I just ask about the terms of reference then, and the timing for those terms of reference for the Community Energy Innovation Fund, like that?
Our expectation is we wanted council's approval of the overall strategy first and get this done, and that's what we're in the process later today to seek, and ultimately council, that we would focus immediately thereafter on writing the terms of reference. As I said, Mr. Smith has staff in economic development who run very comparable programs from an administration perspective, and we have templates from other programs we could use, and we were hoping to bring back in the first quarter of 2018 the mandate and governance model for that fund.
So Q1 of 2018.
That's right.
And when would we see that work actually starting? When would we see the work begin?
I think it'd be in the second half of 2018 that we would have people identified to receive. They will have made application, and we'd be really having direct partners at that point.
Okay. So a holistic approach to staffing, but not a holistic approach to funding. I guess we pull staff from everywhere, but we have to find the funding from this committee, which I find a bit, well, I'll throw out amusing for now, but that's for the larger discussion later on when we decide whether we're going to support this budget or not. That's all the questions I have on staffing, but just to say that I stand firmly by my motion that I really do believe we need to have staffing in place to be able to take advantage of some of the, we've got partners, provincial and federal partners, who are coming to the table and have got, we're able to leverage some funding, FCM funding, And today, we don't have anyone doing that. And I would like to see this work starting the day we come out of our budget meeting. So I do stand very firmly by my motion that we do need dedicated funding, even though because it's coming from capital to operating, it is temporary for now, but at least it can give some assurance to the community that we're serious, half serious about attacking climate change.
Thank you. Next on my list will be Councillor Cloutier, followed by Leeper.
Thank you, Chair. And these are questions on the entire budget, right? Not only, okay. Let me go to stormwater services on page 6 of the rate-supported budget. Just a question. Stormwater services, in 2016, the actual was 27.7 million, and in 2017, 45.8 million. What happened, and our budget for 2018 is 48.4 million. What happened in 2016? Can anyone help me with that?
We only had the capital dollars associated with the stormwater. Included in the stormwater, this year we have both operating and capital.
Okay, so in 2016, we only had the capital dollars.
Clarify, capital contribution.
And now we're including both capital and operating dollars. Is that what I heard?
Correct. The capital contribution, capital is a separate budget, but in the operating dollars, we have a capital contribution.
So I would find, if I would look more closely when I do, I would find a corresponding lower amount under another line item. That would be roughly equivalent, so that we're still talking the same amounts of dollars in constant dollars?
The amounts would be under the wastewater.
It would be under wastewater. Okay. Okay. In 2006, there was an audit done, the wet infrastructure management plan, I believe it's called. Can anyone speak to how we are progressing on the recommendations of that audit and what's been implemented and what is left to be implemented from that plan? And I don't necessarily need an answer right now, but...
Mr. Chair, it's not an audit per se, but it's a strategic plan in terms of how we manage infrastructure investments related to wet weather conditions, and basically has three focus. One is on flood protection, the other one is capacity for growth, and then it's also reducing environmental impacts of the river. So it is the basis of our long-term plan in terms of how we manage infrastructure investments with a specific focus in terms of wet weather events.
And are you able to speak to, in terms of budgets feeding our strategic objectives, and one of them is to implement all the recommendations of that plan, how we are doing in that plan?
We're still progressing in terms of the plan. We're still on track. There are a number of initiatives, both operational and capital, that fall under that plan. And also what we're projecting is basically continued investments to be able to support the implementation of the plan.
Okay, perhaps we could have a discussion offline that would, and this is in the context of the latest big storm that we had on October 30th, where 70 millimeters of rain fell in a very short period of time and kind of overwhelmed the system, so in certain areas, and thus would like to chat about that capacity management issue. Councillor Eglai referred to, and others, the 500,000 research for the Green Fleet initiative, and what committee should it be in. Of that 500,000, what is the research component of that? Is it simply implementation and execution, or are there research components that will benefit the entire city and that would found under another committee?
Mr. Acting Chair, the Green Fleet initiative, most of it is actually being spent on anti-idling and on biofuels. It's not actually being spent on the top-up that's required to move vehicles to electric. There's, as we know, there's still a premium for electric vehicles, and we do use some of it for that, but the majority of those funds are actually on dealing with our fleet to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. So there is a lot of research that goes into it to come up with anti-idling devices, to look at, for example, there was the fund that we were just referred to. We have application in there to with respect to biofuels, to because there is no distributor in Ottawa anymore, to allow that to happen. So there is a lot of research that goes into selecting what we're going to do and what we're going to invest that money in, and looking at different opportunities for us to reduce greenhouse gas emissions for our fleet, which is the biggest in Ottawa.
And in that, is it appropriate that the department that is funding that research through its budget be able to get a refund, or and again, I'm talking about whether the amount is in the right since there is a benefit for other departments, roads and fire and police perhaps, in future reduced operating costs, should some of that research portion be ascribed to other committees?
So fleet is a corporate service, so it covers all of the city's fleet with the exception of transit and police. So your roads, your paramedics, your fire, your bylaw, all of those are covered by your fleet services. The research that they do applies to everyone. The reason why that is with this committee now is because you have now added climate change into your raison d'etre, into your title, and into your mandate. Green Fleet is all about reducing greenhouse gas emissions, which is what you're trying to do to meet your climate change objectives. So you could put it with FEDCO, that's where because it is a corporate service, but clearly, because of the mandate of this committee, it was felt this should now be with Environment and Climate Change Committee.
Okay. Monsieur Willis, vous avez dit qu'il y avait eu 13 demandes qui avaient été envoyées au gouvernement fédéral et provincial récemment. Un peu des conversations qu'on a eues avec Ecology Ottawa et d'autres intervenants était qu'on n'avait pas le personnel pour faire ces demandes au gouvernement fédéral et provincial. Êtes-vous d'accord avec ça? Est-ce que c'est vrai? Est-ce qu'il y a des améliorations à faire?
So, Mr. Chair, I'll respond in English, and soon I will do better than that, Councillor. I'll just use the example of the program from the cap and trade that happened in the last week. Is the process that happened is the provincial government announced the availability of funding for monies available under cap and trade. The city manager's office issued an alert to every department that each department put forward its nomination of projects to go forward, which was the city manager's office tracked that A, and B, that they were actually submitted, and we went forward and made, last time I counted there were 13, I believe there may even have been more, and so I think that this is an effective process, and this is similar to the processes we use for other funding that has nothing to do with environmental matters, where there might be initiatives for elsewhere in the organization, so we're taking the same approach. I want to give the committee confidence that when there's money on the table on another level of government, we actively seek it all the time. And
that was part of the the line that I'd been hearing from persons, that there is money available, but we are not positioned to put in the funding to do the applications. Are we in a position in our budgets to be able to, depending on what the federal and provincial government bring down the pipeline, to move money to take advantage of a program or an initiative that they might propose that might require 50% municipal, 50% funding from the other level of government? What is the process so that we could take advantage of those?
So there are a number of different options, and just giving you some past history as an example is where we have a project that's already in the pipeline as part of our multi-capital programs. We can shuffle around projects from year to year in order to take advantage opportunistically of something that's happened. The Canada 150 projects are good examples of that. Also, as I said, if there's a community partner or a chance to bring outside participation, that special fund, the community, if there's a community partner, we may be able to use that to put our portion on the table. I think we are creative as opportunities come along, and it is sometimes about coming to committee and council and asking for reprioritization of priorities, as we often do during the year when some projects and others.
Thank you. That's all I have for now. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Liepert.
Thank you, Chair. Like Councillor Brockington, I'm also going to be a little bit all over the map here. To begin, I'll go right to the heart of the environment budget, which is the road cut degradation fees that we charge. The road cut degradation fees are proposed to rise 2% this year. And I'm wondering if sometime before council I can get some information about how much money we're collecting from road cut degradation fees. As I've said a number of times in front of different committees, a number of the roads in the urban wards are beginning to suffer a lot of degradation as a result of the cuts that they're to put in the infills without any resurfacing or rebuilds on the near horizon. How much are we those fees? What is the need that we have? And I'd be interested in some color around whether or not enough money. Also in the budget, hauled liquid waste, the fees are proposed to go up by again by around 2%, I think, for each of those categories. Does that mean that the review of the hauled liquid waste hasn't been completed yet? I'm wondering when we can expect to see the new rate structure coming out for that one.
Yes, we'll be completing it within the next term of council.
Okay, so we'll see. We'll probably see then different proposed in the budget of for next year.
Correct, Chair.
So, okay. One of the other areas that struck me, the forestry budget overall is anticipated to go up by, I think it is just under 1%. It's like a 0.009% if I take a look at page 14 on the tax budget. And one of the categories that doesn't seem to be going up very quickly, or if at all, was material and services. Is there something that we used to spend money on, but we don't anticipate needing to spend as much money on? I'm just wondering why we're not seeing that budget going up by as much as we're seeing.
I'm just going to get Lila Gibbons here.
Yeah, of course.
I'll start off with the first part of your question. I may not have got the second part. The only increase that we're seeing on the forestry budget at this point in time, it's about $165,000, and that's towards cost of living. So increase in staffing costs and contract costs.
What about materials? That's not going up very much, if at all.
Not at this point in time. What we will be looking at through, starting in 2018, is through the Urban Forest Management Plan. There's going to be some requests coming in 2019 as we put the plans forward.
So, and I'm glad you raised that, because with respect to the Urban Forest Management Plan, I believe in 2018 we're going to start a review of the tree bylaw. Do we have the budget in here, or is it a different group's budget to be able to take on that work? Because I think doing the UFMP with strategic initiative funding.
I believe it's actually under, because it's related to bylaw review, I think it's under the CPS
Okay.
budget.
And so that's still on the work plan for 2018?
But it is definitely on the work plan. Like several initiatives, because it's contributing from several departments, I imagine there's, our department's budget is buried in our broader long-range planning element of it.
Well, I just want to make sure that there's adequate funding in there, because that's a key review for many in certainly Kitchissippi Ward. So if I may, Mr. Willis, with respect to the 33 projects that we have identified for energy evolution, has there been any analysis done of how many hours it will take?
I don't think we've done that level of detail of analysis. I mean, the way the projects, and I'm talking about this later this morning in the other presentation, but we picked 33 that we felt were doable in the short term within the resources we thought we had available, and that was part of the consideration, also based on the advice from the community, what would be really quick wins to get done. So, we'll be pulling resources from different non-traditional ways. Mr. Smith has a larger group to draw from, and he's going to have to draw staff who traditionally may not have worked on a project like this to support it.
I've heard from, and I trust a number of the delegations who have come up, though, that we have lost opportunities due to not having the staffing available to take advantage of those. It is difficult to take a look at these items, any number of which seem to be almost full-time jobs in themselves, and imagine that we're going to be able to do it. Like Councillor McKinney, I know city staff are working flat out. I think she used exactly the right term. It's to imagine that they have a lot of excess capacity to start working on additional projects as well. There'll be an opportunity cost associated with that as well in terms of operations across the rest of the organization. Without hearing that we've done some sort of an analysis of how many hours could we do, how many hours are available, it's difficult to imagine that we'll be able to accomplish what we said we're going to accomplish in this section of the budget.
As this crosses multiple department lines, as I said, I can only speak for our group specifically, and perhaps Mr. Smith is probably the best one to add to this. I mean, I think what we're saying is the staff who have been working on this so far won't be the only ones who will be working on it. For the items that have been identified within our department, we actually feel that there are staff in other areas who have some valid advice to provide and support.
I'm just looking, for example, I mean, just establishing a Community Energy Innovation Fund, which is going to involve PIED in a fairly significant way. That could be a half-time person just to develop that.
I don't think I don't know, Mr. Chair, that I'd agree with that. I mean, we actually have a number of other funds that in rural funds and innovation funds already that actually the heavy lifting of how to set up and the administration structure for a fund already exists. The issue will be consultation with the groups on the criteria and how it will work, meeting the legal and financial tests that we have within the organization, with some advice from the other departments, and then bringing forward and reporting to committee and council. Once that's in place, then process is very similar to the Innovation Fund, for example, which Economic Development actually runs.
So call it a quarter-time person.
And the other thing I will say is that we have a number of competing objectives on staffing requirements in any given department. I'm not our own department. There are other areas we do it, and I think we are trying to be, with this new organizational model, more nimble and resources back and forth and bringing in other stuff when we can from other discipline areas, and if we have unfilled positions, which we tend to do, this would be a priority project for contract staff to supplement the staff we already have, and that's one of the things we did do this year to make sure we hit today with the energy evolution strategy.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Now I've got Councillor Moffat.
Thank you, Chair. And just on the motion that's before us, can you clarify to me what we would be taking away from when we take that 200 from the Community Energy Fund? What would we be taking away if we were to approve that?
So, Mr. Chair, it's the councillor's motion, but I suspect the intent, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that recognizing that the Community Energy Innovation Fund is going to take a while to get it set up and run, there's sort of, I would presume the assumption was don't have as much money in the 2018 budget for that because of come to play later on, and use resources instead to support one of the other initiative areas in the Energy Evolution Program. And that's my presumption of what the intent of the motion was.
But you spoke eloquently about how there's sort of those 33 go across departments, how there's people working on different projects, whether it's through your shop or Mr. Smith's shop or the other shops that you mentioned. And I appreciate what Councillor Leeper was saying. You haven't done saying that. You also haven't done a complete analysis of how you'd be exactly allocating this as well. But you're confident that between now and 2019, when you bring us that first update, you can work within the resources that you have based on those 33 recommendations and how you explained you would have the cross development around there.
As I'll indicate later on in my presentation, there are a number of initiatives that we can get started on in 2018, a very large chunk, and make real progress on. In 2019, there will be other initiatives. We will need to bring some suggestions forward for resourcing. I think if I can go back to again, and I could be corrected on this, the intent of diverting funds from one of the initiatives to effectively another of the initiatives of the 33, which is my understanding of the intent of the motion, would be to prioritize and maybe kickstart one of them faster than one of the others. I think if that's my read on the situation.
Okay. So can I ask for your opinion on the motion then as well, in terms of, do you think it would be helpful to support the motion, or do you feel that you can accommodate it with the status quo?
Mr. Chair, I think it's fair to say we'll take committee's and council's direction on this matter. I mean, if one initiative is preferred over the other, I mean, we have learned a lot through the Catalyst projects, and I think what we didn't want to do was lose momentum on the Catalyst projects. If council says to us, instead of 500,000 on continuing those type of Catalyst projects, we only have 250, we will work with that. And we'll come back next year and ask for that to be topped up again. If it's committee and council's direction that we put more energy to the buildings side of the portfolio through the Smart Energy Initiative, we can take committee and council's direction on that.
Because I've also heard sort of both sides as well from Ecology Ottawa that they would be supporting dollars going directly towards those projects on the ground, or with those grants that we're providing to some of our partners as well.
As I said, we've put a menu of options in front of council. I hope that when that other report is brought forward, and after this, we will get a broad endorsement of the strategy. We put what we thought were the quick wins there, and we can adapt based on committee and council's direction.
Okay. The 1 million that's earmarked for retrofits to 2020 buildings, is that heating and cooling systems and just retrofitting energy kind of efficiency in those buildings? And do we have that list already that we're looking at?
I'll ask Mr. Morissette to answer that question.
Yes, there'll be a variety of approaches to the lighting systems, air conditioning, boilers, and those kinds of stuff.
Okay, and we have that list of buildings that we're going to be working on as well?
Yeah.
Okay. And are those, that 1 million, I mean, it's a good chunk of money, but it's also seems like a low number. Something that we potentially match with other programs for federal or provincial funding when we do these retrofits, or is this solely something that we're taking care of within this envelope?
Well, with this new program that came from the provincial government, we placed an application back in, I believe the deadline was November the 14th, and we hope to be able to leverage more money with that.
Okay. To match the 1 million, or is that?
No, I believe in the neighborhood of $500,000.
Okay. Just on there's a couple of accounts on the tax supported, for example, on the Ottawa Waste Plan implementation, where there's still funds that are not spent. That's on page 42, where 800 was earmarked, and to date there's 743 not spent. There's also one in the meter change as well. On page 121 of rate supported. So I'm just wondering what those unspent dollars are as we approach the end of the year, and what's going to happen with those if they're not being spent.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So our process is that the project managers identify when capital works should close. Once the year has started, we allow the year to come to a conclusion, and then as we go into the new year, we look at all of the projects that were supposed to close in the previous year, in 2017, and we, it's okay. We talk to the project managers, and if the project is finished, we close it, we bring it forward. If it is not finished, the project manager has to write a rationale. We come forward to council, and council approves the project continuing on, not being closed. So it's already a process. It doesn't happen before the end of the year, though. It happens in the start of the new year, because they have until December 31st to spend the monies that they said they were going to spend for projects that were going to close this year.
Okay, so you're not aware of any delays. It just seems for the meter change out, the $0 have been spent of the 500,000. Is that normal at this point of the year, or is that not updated in the budget?
The meter change out program is, now those are September numbers as well, or August numbers. So there has been spending since then. Unfortunately, we can't keep it up to date, but that'll be reviewed again. You'll see that coming forward in the capital close and adjustment report. And if there is a reason why no spending has been has happened, but I believe some has, and they want to continue with the program, to put forward the rationale, and you have to agree to it.
Okay. Okay, and for the fleet growth as well, and page 123, is that similar as well?
That is the same. Fleet growth is, there's a significant lead time for some of the vehicles that we purchase. For example, fire trucks, it's 18-month lead time, so you will always have a lag in when you actually approve a budget and when it actually gets spent on the capital side.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Chair, and I want to thank FCA, because I think their point about Hydro Ottawa is an important one. I think Councillor Eglai, who raised it as well, and is on FETCO, is going to be, I don't want to speak on his behalf, but I think he was interested and certainly interested in potentially pursuing it, and it makes sense, Hydro Ottawa being a leader certainly on the environment too, and they do give us a lot of money every year, but certainly it would be worthy to explore that further and to see how we can take some of those funds and use them to move forward with our policy, as FCA was advocating in their presentation. So I think that's certainly an interesting idea worth exploring further at FETCO. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, indeed, thank you. And there have been ongoing conversations, but nothing to the point where it could be brought forward, confirmed here in front of, in time for budget. So that will certainly come forward when there is something to seek approval for or to bring forward. Councillor Moffat.
Thank you. I just have one question that's incredibly deep into the weeds. Last year, we changed the leaf and yard waste prices when it comes to, I'm looking off at the audience because I'm pretty sure the answer to my question is going to come from Marilyn Journeau. We changed it. We used to have, it used to be free for residents to drop it off, but it cost money for commercial entities to drop it off. Because we're having issues with commercial entities, we then changed that. We created a fee that was $5.20 across the 100 kilograms, and then over 100 kilograms, it was $52. I noticed both those fees are now down almost 30%. So just curious, the feedback that we got last year, I know there were some complaints, and then what led to the price change?
Mr. Chair, we adjusted the price, so it was always meant to be a cost recovery fee. And so a year into the operation of the program, where we had implemented the new fees, we realized we were having a surplus, so we've brought the fees down into a line so that we net zero.
All right, so you're doing your best not to make any money at the Trailer Road landfill.
No.
I'm just joking with you. You don't have to answer.
No, we want to encourage people to divert their leaf and yard waste, but
sure.
we didn't want to make money on the program.
Yeah. And
so
you found
it's
that
cost-neutral.
You found that it was helpful that you didn't have the issues that you had previously with the commercial misuse of the program?
Agreed.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you indeed. I guess that cuts both ways. Either that's a new source of revenue, or it's an opportunity to show our taxpayers that we do not, in fact, try to profit off of programs that are meant to simply be cost recovery. So that's a good catch. Next is Councillor Brockington and then Nussbaum.
Just very briefly, Mr. Chair, are we still spending money on the emerald ash borer?
Yes, Chair, we still have ash trees to take down. It is in the decline, though.
How many years are we still projected to be cutting down, replanting, stump grinding?
We don't have that projection. I think it's diminishing rapidly, so I'll get that back to the councillor, Chair.
Sure. And at our last meeting of this committee, I had asked, we were talking about the underwhelming response to the green bin and recycling programs. I had asked you about reasons. You said you had intelligence at your fingertips as to why people are not using this to the degree that we would like. Can I still get that information? I'm trying to reconcile whether we're doing enough, whether it's public education or other initiatives to increase usage. So I need the in order to see if this budget is appropriately resourced in that area.
As Chair, I apologize to the council. We will get that information to you.
Okay. And I won't go into the detail about Hydro Ottawa, but all I'd ask is, can staff issue a memo to members of council about the process and procedure? I know it was explained a while ago, and another member of council may or may not pursue this. I'm certainly interested in it, but if council wants to either tease out a portion of that dividend or specify an amount it would like to see every year coming from Hydro Ottawa, how we would go about doing that. I just want to know the hows.
So, Mr. Chair, it's a little premature in the budget process to bring that forward, but when we bring the proposal forward for the program and governance of the Energy Innovation Fund, I think at that time we can take the time to thoughtfully put that on as how you might use that source of revenue at that point in time.
That's fair. I acknowledge it's not for this budget round, but if we don't have a adequate and reasonable funding source for energy evolution, for example, we're going to have this conversation year after year after year. We're adequately supporting that initiative or not. If we have a dedicated source and we enshrine that through some sort of council policy, then that conversation ends. So I acknowledge maybe it's not for this budget year, but let's get those wheels turning early into the new year. And Mr. Chair, I'll just leave it at that for comments. The last thing I want to just talk about is, I think it's premature at this committee meeting today to approve Councillor McKenney's motion. I do go on the record saying I do believe there may be a staffing issue. I would like to get more information between now and council as to staff's intent on how they're going to lasso all those people who are responsible for the various initiatives that Mr. Willis talked about. And so I don't want to vote against the motion today. And so I'd like to know if Councillor McKenney would be supportive in referring her motion to council and allowing council to consider that. Let's have that fuller conversation between now and then, and because I will not be supporting the motion today, and I don't want to be forced to make that vote today. So
Thank you, and thanks for your consideration. I have to say that it would be impossible for me to support this budget going forward today without something. And for me, this something is, to suggest that we take it out of our community energy fund is difficult, but we're stuck with that policy that where we have to find funding from within a committee bucket. But the reality is that work's not going to get done unless I believe we have staff dedicated towards it, and I'm adamant about it. I cannot support the budget without this small piece, so I will be leaving it on the table for today.
I appreciate that answer. Mr. Chair, can I ask through you to staff, we have legal counsel here? We do. So if Councillor McKenney's motion fails at committee, can we revisit the matter at council?
Chair, yes, we can.
Okay, so I would like to move that we refer Councillor's motion today regarding the 2 FTE to Council on December 13th.
That's a motion before us. Can I seek some advice on what order we would need to, would we need to vote on that now or when? Yep. Yep. He's moved a motion. Okay. That's something we need to vote on now? Is that right?
Mr. Chair, the matter of referral is before committee, so committee may ask questions on referral.
Okay. So are there any questions to ask on referral? In which case, we'll take a vote. I guess we need to do ayes and nays. This is on referral to council. This is on referral to council of Councillor McKinney's motion, as opposed to if we reject it, we would vote on it afterwards here.
Councillor Brockington?
Yes.
Councillor Cloutier?
No.
Councillor Leeper?
No.
Councillor McKenney?
No.
Councillor Moffat?
No.
Councillor Kakish?
No.
Councillor Taylor?
No.
And Chair Chernyshenko?
No. Okay, so
Motion
that's
loses.
motion loses. Yeah. I would like to, though, offer another way out. It won't be a motion, and Councillor McKinney, following this, could still choose to bring her motion. Whether I could give as direction, since it's really something that people are asking for, in time for council, when we will be addressing this budget as a whole, as well as energy evolution as a whole. I would like to give direction to staff to give us any more precision that you can on how you would, if I can paraphrase Cora or Lasso or herd cats, but no, that wasn't quite used, that was me, how we would provide clearer direction and assurance to council and to the public that staffing is adequate and that we can rest assured that it's not through additional staff resources at this time, or at least that's not the only avenue in order to get this work done.
Mr. Chair, perhaps I can be helpful to committee and ease it out of its predicament that in consultation with Mr. Smith, we as staff are prepared to support the request of the councillor and switched the priority on this for the understanding that this is a one-time commitment within one fiscal year, just so that it's clearly understood with what we're prepared to do. But we're not in a position to identify yet where those resources should reside. I'd like to take that back to the management team for further consultation. But to ease Committee's decision, we're prepared to be supportive of that recommendation.
All right, help me understand then. Prior to a vote on Councillor McKinney's motion, you're in a sense prepared to accept that request?
That's correct.
Okay. This makes it awkward for me as chair then, because I don't support the motion and was not going to support the motion. So now would be the time for me to speak. And so I think what I will be proposing is that should her motion succeed, that we know that you are prepared to support and work with it, that it's not against your will. My rationale is this. I have shared the same concerns we've heard from the public and from members of the committee throughout this meeting that, essentially the challenges ahead of us can take all the money that we can throw at them, but there's only so much money that we can throw at them. And so, of course, I have been championing and working with staff to identify as much additional money as possible for this project and all of the initiatives that will be a part of it. What we have in front of us today was as much as could be found and identified without raiding other committees' budgets and entering into all of that. On the specifics of staffing, I similarly had the concerns that we have seen through staff reorganization, that people who were working on the project were either no longer with the city or were reassigned to other projects. and there were no solely dedicated staff on this project, and that causes me concern. It still does. However, in my subsequent conversations, I did hold a meeting with senior managers just a few days ago and felt more assured as to their intentions, some of which aren't yet programs that or plans that can be announced. I personally am more comfortable that the staffing is either there or will be without requesting a transfer of money of this kind. The other part of what I'm saying is this: the Community Energy Fund is the only capital fund that is being made available to the community as opposed to the corporation of the City of Ottawa for initiatives which they can then use to leverage money from other grants, sources of funding, etc. And I feel it's very, we are unfortunately, voting to rob Peter to pay Paul, if that's the right analogy there, and I know even Councillor McKenney, who's brought this forward, wishes there was another way of doing this. I end up falling on the side of not being able to support the motion because I do believe that for this year we are going to be able to reassign staffing to do this work, and that capital money is very important. From the outset, as I will be saying when we actually get to the item, funnily enough, we haven't actually debated energy evolution yet, but that's what happens when you're voting on a budget at the same time. We have brought along in partnership many people and organizations to feel they were a part of something that was a citywide initiative, and this is the only source of funding that is being made available for their projects, and so I am not prepared to cut back on that funding. I guess you could call that then my argument for why I will be voting against this motion. And I think the process now then would be, as we go through our budget votes on the specific items, we will vote on that, and should it succeed, we know that staff will support and work with it. Should it fail, it will stand as it is, and the current budget will stand. Did that make sense? No, I tried to. Thank you. I still have Councillor Nussbaum who would like to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a few questions related, in fact, very relevant, I think, to the staffing issue. So it's been discussed by public delegations and others around this table that there are a series of different funds available from the Government of Canada, from the Province of Ontario, from the FCM, to partner on various green initiatives. There's the Municipal GHG Challenge Fund, the FCM Green Municipal Fund, the Government of Canada Infrastructure Ministry has a number. And I guess my question is to staff, would our participation in applications in these types of programs be greater if there were dedicated staff to involve themselves? And I know what is always a very time-consuming application process. I would say no, Mr. Chair, because right now, whenever any program comes out, this is sent to the organization. Each general manager assigns resources to pursue applications if we meet the criteria, and we apply for programs in many varieties of areas across the corporation as all the time, not just environmental.
So as a follow-up to that, did the City of Ottawa apply to the Government of Ontario Municipal GHG Challenge Fund?
Yes, Mr. Chair, that was the, I've now actually been provided the list. As I said, the last time I counted, there were 13 of them, and we can, 13 applications to that fund.
And do we know yet what the results are?
No, because the deadline just closed recently, Mr. Chair.
Do we, have we satisfied the requirement for a community-wide inventory of GHG emissions?
Mr. Chair, can I ask the member to consider deferring that to the discussion of the energy evolution item, which comes later in the agenda?
Well, it's just a simple yes or no. Do we have, is that a project that's being completed?
That's part of the, Mr. Chair, that's part of the information we're providing in the next presentation.
Okay. However, if it's, well, Councillor
all I'm asking for is a
Councillor
yes or no.
Nussbaum does not vote here, but he has come. If it is a simple answer, can we give him the simple version if there is a simple version now, and then we can elaborate more during.
I can't
that
say for the
discussion.
rest of the meeting, that's just one of the.
So, Mr. Chair, in the Energy Evolution staff report, there is what we call a Sankey diagram that shows the sources of energy inputs in which sector they go to, which is an inventory of fuel sources towards how they're used, and that's useful. Happy to meet with the councillor if it's useful offline to provide more information.
And just so I'm not trying to be difficult, the reason I'm asking the question is that some of these funds, and in particular the province of Ontario, require municipalities that are applying to have existing community-wide inventories of GHG emissions. And so I'm trying to think about, if I have to vote on Councillor McKenney's motion, if it's reintroduced at council, are there specific elements that would improve the probability of success in leveraging other sources of money if we had more staff who were able to complete the tasks to make us eligible for those funds? So that's what my line of inquiry is on that. That's thankful. I can leave it there on that point. I just want to quickly turn to Hydro Ottawa. And I know Councillor Brockington, I think, asked a little bit about the options in terms of taking dividend funds for building energy efficiency. From what I understand, that may not be necessary because I understand that Hydro Ottawa is a keen partner in working with the city on rendering all, if not most, of our buildings more energy efficient in a way that would require no capital investment. Can staff speak a little bit to how those discussions are going?
We've received a preliminary presentation from Ottawa Hydro, and we're reviewing what they're proposing to us. So at this point in time, we have not come to a conclusion on it.
Okay. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. So unless there are other questions to staff at this point, this is an opportunity for any additional debate on the budget as a whole and specifically on Councillor McKenney's motion. Should there not be any, I'm seeing none, then we will go through this roadmap voting on the individual budget items, including Councillor McKenney's motion when that comes up. So if I might ask then Councillor Brockington to walk us through, and we will vote on, is it necessary to vote on, Councillor McKenney would like to speak to this, or, yeah.
Yeah, I think that it should be a motion first, and then, because that will influence how I vote on the budget.
All right. I suppose it's 6 of one or half dozen of the other, but no.
No, because it will influence how I vote on the tax-supported budget in terms of whether I will support going the allocated funding for number 5. Absolutely.
No, we were going to vote on yours prior to voting on 5, is what I was suggesting.
Excellent.
There we go.
Okay.
If I was not clear enough,
You're gonna-
I will now, we will vote 1 through 4, and before voting on 5, we'll vote on yours.
I'm
Okay.
catching on.
And it is approaching meal time. I think that's starting to affect us, and I will announce right now that once we have voted on this, we will take a half-hour meal break. There's no way we're going to get through the next section without food, and so we'll break then. Information on budget. Councillor Brockington, could you walk us through then the items?
So, Mr. Chair, there are two major items that we are to vote on. One is the tax supported, the other is the rate supported. I'll deal with tax supported first, and at your request, I will read them, and we will vote on each clause. So the motion before us is that the Environment and Climate Protection Committee recommends that Council, sitting as Committee of the Whole, approve the Environment and Climate Protection Committee 2018 tax-supported draft operating and capital budget as follows. Number 1, infrastructure services as follows. User fees, page 9. Operating resource requirement, page 8.
So on item 1, is that carried? Thank you.
Item 2 is the environmental initiatives operating resource requirement found on page 10.
On item 2? Carried.
Item 3, solid waste services as follows. User fees, pages 12 and 13. Operating resource requirements, page 11.
On that item? Carried.
Item 4, forestry services as follows. User fees, page 15. Operating resource requirement, page 14.
On that item? Carried. Thank you. So
At
now
this-
we will consider Councillor McKinney's motion. Yeah. All right. You've had it. Does anyone want this read out again, or are we prepared to vote? Councillor McKinney, you're okay with us voting without rereading it? Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. So on Councillor McKinney's motion, then, do you want yeas and nays? Yeas and nays, please. Yeah.
Councillor Brockington?
No.
Councillor Cloutier?
Yes.
Councillor Leeper? Yes. Councillor McKinney?
Yes.
Councillor Moffat?
Yes.
Councillor Kakish?
No.
Councillor Taylor?
No.
Chair Chernushenko?
No.
Tie. Loses on a tie.
Loses on a tie, a 4-4. Wow. Yeah. Chair, Vice Chair Shirley's an emergency dentist chair, I gather. Yeah. Yeah. All right. No, I'm afraid it is what it is. It is what it is. All right. So on the, it fails. On item 5, then, not amended. Is that carried?
Well, do you want me to read it?
We want yeas and nays. Okay.
You want it read first?
Yes, please.
Item 5 is that the Environment and Climate Protection Committee capital budget, page 16, individual projects listed pages 28 to 31 and pages 33 to 39.
Right.
Councillor Brockington?
Yes.
Councillor Cloutier?
Yes.
Councillor Leeper? No. Councillor McKinney?
No.
Councillor Moffat?
Yes.
Councillor Kakish?
Yes.
Councillor Taylor?
Yes.
Chair Chernushenko?
Yes.
6 to 2.
All right, by a vote of 6 to 2 then, on item 5. So the tax-supported budget passes then, and we move to rate-supported.
Next, Mr. Chair, rate-supported budget. I'll move that the Environment and Climate Protection Committee recommends that Council, sitting as Committee of the Whole, approve the Environment and Climate Change Protection Committee 2018 rate-supported draft operating and capital budget as follows. The first item is drinking water services as follows. User fees, pages 8 to 13, and the operating resource requirement on page 7. Item 2 is wastewater services as follows. User fees, pages 15 through 17, and operating resource requirement, page 14. Third item is stormwater services as follows. User fees, pages 19 to 22, operating resource requirements, page 18. Final item is that the Environment and Climate Protection Committee rate-supported capital budget, pages 23 to 26, and individual projects listed on pages 37 to 57, 59 to 62, 64 to 94, and 96 to 112 be approved. Carried.
All right, thank you very much. So budget was approved, tax and rate. That brings me to one other item. Councillor Vice Chair Shirelli had a motion. He has decided that he will bring the motion to council. It doesn't require referral or a vote at this time, so we will see that item on the Hydro Ottawa dividend, and we may actually have more information at that time as well in the ensuing couple of weeks. Okay, well, thank you. That was a interesting and at the end procedurally challenging vote, but I appreciate everyone's participation and hanging in there. I know there are many people in the audience, both staff and members of the community, who had probably hoped that they would be done by noon, but I guess we all share that. We do have a very substantial item, the energy evolution, as well as the electric vehicle charging report before us. If I might recommend, I said 30 minutes, let's do 36 and come back at a nice clean 1 o'clock. My plan would be to start at exactly 1 o'clock, so please do your best. Thank you.